Here begins media number 1 of the deposition of Sarah O'Brien in the matter of Tesla, Inc. versus Martin Tripp. This case is in the United States District Court, District of Nevada, and the case number is 318CV00296 LRHCBC. Today's date is June 5th, 2019, and the time is approximately 5 p.m. This deposition is taking place at 68 Willow Road, Menlo Park, California, 94025. The videographer is Patrick Pacheco, appearing on behalf of Depo Dynamics. Would counsel please identify yourselves and state whom you represent?
Allison LeBeau from Houston Hennigan on behalf of Tesla and the witness. With me is my colleague Eunice Leong, also from Houston Hennigan.
Sean Gates, Karis Lex on behalf of Tesla.
Robert Mitchell on behalf of the defendant counterclaimant Martin Tripp.
The reporter today is Michael Hensley with Depo Dynamics. Would the reporter please swear in the witness?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give in the cause now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Good morning, Ms. O'Brien, or good afternoon, I should say. I'm Robert Mitchell of Tiffany & Bosco, a law firm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we represent Martin Tripp in litigation he has pending with Tesla. Let me begin by asking you, have you ever had your deposition taken before?
No.
Well, let me go over just some of the ground rules, if you may, so that we can understand one another. First of all, you're going to be asked a series of questions here today and expected to answer, and it's important for you to realize that your testimony is subject to the same penalties of perjury as if you were in a court of law. Do you understand that?
I do.
All right, and it's important for you to testify truthfully to the best of your ability. You understand?
Yes.
And because we're making a physical record of the testimony, it's important that you answer in audible answers. Nodding of the head or ahs don't go over very well in the transcript. Fair enough?
Totally fair.
Okay. And also, to make a good record, it's important that we don't speak over one another. If I am clumsily asking you a question and you think you know where you're going, wait for me to finish before you answer, and I'll try to do the same before asking another question, just so we keep the record straight. Is that fair?
Understood, yeah.
Okay. Are you on any medication or have any medical condition that would affect your ability to testify here today?
No.
Where are you currently employed?
Facebook.
All right. And did I understand from a comment made before your deposition that you're represented by counsel here today?
Yes.
Okay. And who is your counsel?
Allison.
I'm sorry?
Allison.
Okay. And so you're represented by Tesla's counsel? Yep. All right. Let me begin by getting a little bit of background information from you, if you will. Could you please state your full legal name for the record?
Sarah Sheila O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, have you ever used any other names?
No.
Would you tell us how old you are?
I'm 38.
And what is your birth date?
7th of December 1980.
And forgive these questions, they're just typical background
No.
questions. Have you ever been arrested?
No.
Have you ever been charged with any crime?
No.
Have you ever been sued?
No.
Let's tell us a little bit about your education and then your work history. Let's start with your education. What is your education?
Up to a degree. Do you want me to give the whole history?
If you will, kindly.
Yeah. So I studied music at a school from the age of 14, and then went to a university in Liverpool and studied entertainment management.
All right. And when did you complete a degree in that field? And what was the name of the degree that you obtained?
Entertainment management.
And I take it that was in England?
Yes.
All right. And when did you complete that?
2002.
And did you pursue any further education beyond that?
That was it.
And did you at some point relocate or move to the United States?
Yeah, so I used to work for Apple in Europe and then relocated out to the States about 7 years ago with Apple.
Apple, the computer company?
Yeah.
And would you describe for us, going forward in time, your job history since college?
So I graduated with a degree in music business, went travelling for a year, then worked in a company called PPL, which is in America you'd call that ASCAP, so like a music licensing and rights agency. I think was there for 4 years, left there, went to EMI, and then left EMI to join Apple to do music PR for iPod, iTunes, then launched the App Store, relocated out to the US to run comms for iPhone, then launched Apple Watch. Then in 2 years ago, last September, so it would have been 2016, left Apple and went to Tesla as their Senior Director of Communications, and then got promoted, I think that August, became VP of Communications, and then left Tesla September just gone, and then joined Facebook in January.
All right. And describe for me, what was the time frame, the bookends of when you worked for Tesla?
September 2016 through to September 2018.
And did your role or title at Tesla change over that time period?
It did once, from Senior Director to a VP.
Okay. And what was the area of work that you did for Tesla?
I ran their communications.
Were you the senior person for
Yeah.
communications?
Yeah.
And what did that position entail?
Building a communications team. I would work directly for Elon, managing all the elements from automotive through to energy, anything that touched communications except for internal comms. That was someone else.
And would communications encompass all contact with the media?
Heading up the team that would manage media relations through to comms strategy, through to momentum, pitching, events, those sorts of things.
During your tenure at Tesla, did all media communications have to go through you before they went to the public?
It would be hard to say that absolutely everything did, just because the team was global. But yeah, I oversaw that team.
Was there a process or a procedure whereby all communications to the public were expected to be either ran through you or vetted through you?
It's hard to say everything to the public, just because it was so much and so broad. But I would have, on kind of major things or big issues, I would have oversight.
All right, and I guess I want to make sure you're answering the same question I'm asking. I'm not asking from a practical standpoint whether you controlled all the communications.
Yeah.
I'm asking whether there was a procedure or a requirement within the company that communications were to be vetted through you before they go to the public.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
I would just ask that you wait for the question to be asked fully before answering.
All right, and what was your position at Tesla on June 20, 2018?
VP of Communications.
Did Tesla provide you with any training for that position?
No.
There have been numerous documents produced in this case where you made comments to the press that were designated as, quote, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, end of quote. Can you explain to me what that phrase means or what it was intended to convey?
Objection assumes facts, not in evidence, but you can still answer.
Can you define what you, can you give me more for what
Certainly.
you're after?
Do you recall on various occasions you would respond to an inquiry by the media and you would provide a quote on behalf of the company, and then you would say, above it, you would say, quote, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson?
Do you mean instead of having it attributed to an individual by name?
Such as yourself?
Yes. So it's really similar procedure to how we used to do it at Apple as well, which is if you have a spokesperson, it keeps it consistent. So it stops you having multiple stories or this multiple stories with various different names across. It's kind of very clear then that this is coming from Tesla.
So, for example, that way it wouldn't be inferred that it was representative of a statement from you, Susan O'Brien, but is a statement from the company.
Correct.
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Well-
Just give me a second to
Yeah.
object and then you can answer.
What other way would it be intended?
From the part before?
Well, from your use of that, were you intending to convey by the use of that statement that whatever communication you were following with was submitted on behalf of Tesla, the company?
Objection, vague and ambiguous. You can answer.
I still don't quite understand the question.
All
Sorry.
right. Maybe we'll get into it when I show you some examples.
Great.
And generally speaking, let me ask you this, do Tesla spokespeople have authority to speak on behalf of Tesla?
Yes.
Let's mark this, please.
Thank you.
I've handed you what's been marked as Exhibit 1, and this appears to be a communication from you to someone named Julia Wong and Dave Arnold on Wednesday, June 20, 2018 at 5:55 p.m. Is that correct?
That's what this says.
Okay. And do you recall who Julia Wong is?
She is a journalist at The Guardian.
And you commence your email by saying, just so you have a statement for the tip we received. And then you have this quote that I asked you about a moment ago in bold, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And now that you have this in front of you, can you explain in more elaboration to me what this attributed to a Tesla spokesperson phrase is meant to convey?
So this is a procedure that we had. So to stop having, because these stories would be global, they would go across the world. If you're attributing everything by name, some journalists in the US would know who I am, but they wouldn't necessarily, in the UK, if you've got whoever is heading up comms there, attributing it to their own name, which is just not consistent. So it's a protocol that we used at Tesla, it's a protocol that we also used at Apple.
Was it intended to deflect attention to you personally and to say, don't say this is from Sarah O'Brien at Tesla, this is from a Tesla spokesperson?
It's to have consistency.
Okay. Now, this, you say just so you have a statement for the tip we received. When you say the tip we received, what are you referring to specifically in that comment at the first page?
You can take a look at the
Right.
rest of the document if you want to get yourself some context.
So I can't remember why I would have necessarily said that first line,
All
which
right.
is the tip we received.
Okay, well, do you know what the tip is that you're referring to here?
I can't remember, but I can make an assumption.
Okay, what is your
Okay.
assumption?
Don't
Guess, but if you have an understanding
Yeah.
of what that refers to, you
Yeah,
can
I'd
say.
assume I'm assuming it's the phone conversation.
Which phone conversation?
The phone conversation that the phone conversation that is in the statement.
The one that's in quotes after the words attributed to a Tesla spokesperson?
Yeah, that phone call.
Okay. And the quote that you're pointing to or directing me to says, this afternoon we received a telephone call from a friend of Mr. Tripp telling us that Mr. Tripp would be coming to the Gigafactory to, quote, shoot the place up, end quote, police have been notified and actions are being taken to enhance security at the Gigafactory, end quote. Can you tell
Just
me,
for the record, I think you said telephone call. It actually says phone call, but otherwise, I think you read that correctly.
can you tell me who authored that quote?
It would have been myself with the help of legal. And potentially Dave Arnold.
Who is Dave Arnold?
He is the, I'm trying to think of what his job title was at the time, the Director of Corporate Communications.
And so do you think you initiated the original draft of that statement?
I can't remember.
If you didn't, do you have a understanding of who would have done that?
It would have been one of the three of us.
And the three of you being who?
Being myself, legal, Todd Marin, and Dave Arnold.
Okay. Tom Marin is legal?
Todd.
Todd Marin?
Yeah.
Okay. And before you sent this email to Ms. Wong, what did you do to ascertain the veracity of this statement?
So from memory, I would have spoken to security. At the time, I would have spoken to the security team. I would have spoken to legal.
What would legal be able to have told you to verify the accuracy of this?
I'm gonna, don't reveal conversations you've had with counsel, that those are privileged.
Fair enough.
But
Let me
I'm-
ask this a different way. Did you go to legal to verify the accuracy of that statement?
No, it would have been to the security team.
All right. And who on the security team did you speak with?
I can't remember.
Are there more than one, during this time period in June of 2018, were there more than one spokesperson for Tesla, or were you the exclusive spokesperson?
Anyone that worked in the comms department, at the time there would have been 40 people, would be classified as spokespeople.
And did they work at the same location as you?
No,
During this time period, where were you based?
Fremont.
How many people in the communications department worked at that location with you, of the 40 you described?
10 to 12, I think.
What people in the communications department were involved with you in determining what statements to make to the public on or about June 20, 2018 related to Martin Tripp?
Dave Arnold, who I've mentioned, Gina Antonini, and perhaps Cameron Mumtez, but I can't remember.
As to those three people, would you tell us what you understood their titles to be at that time?
So Dave was, as I've said, Director of Corporate Communications. Gina was a senior, either a manager or a senior manager of communications, and the same, Cameron would have had the same title.
All right, and all three of these people reported to you in the chain of command?
They did, yeah. Or they actually, Gina and Cameron would report into Dave, and Dave reported into me.
During your time at Tesla, you would not infrequently email the press with statements that they could use on behalf of Tesla, correct?
Correct.
So the example we're looking at is not an uncommon thing for you to have done, is that right?
Either myself or someone in the team, correct.
Was it your intention that the press members be able to use your emails or the contents thereof in their stories and articles?
Yeah.
Did you have to give them permission to do so, or by virtue of sending them the communication, you understood they were free to use your quotes?
It depends on the terms according to the AP rules of journalism. So if it's saying attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, that is something that they can use quoted on the record. If it's on background, it's to inform their article.
Okay, so for example, here where you say on background, and then you have, I'm referring back to Exhibit 1, And then there's a discussion. Was it your intention that that information could not be used?
It's to inform the articles. So a journalist can say, you know, according to Tesla, and then they would frame it how they'd want to frame it.
So they could use the information, but it would be up to them to decide how they want to use
Correct,
it.
yeah. But they wouldn't, just to clarify that, they wouldn't be able to use it in quotations.
All right, but it was understood that Tesla was the source of the information.
Yeah.
And then they could choose to use it or not use it as they so deemed.
That's right.
While at Tesla, did you ever provide statements to the press that were not, quote, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, end of quote, but were, quote, from a source, end of quote?
I can't remember.
Have you ever used that term, quote, from a source, end of quote, in communicating to the press
Objection vague as to time.
at any time at Tesla?
I can't remember.
Have you ever heard that term used in a communications context?
Yes.
Does it have a different connotation or meaning?
As in general media terms.
Sure.
It's normally when you would rather it not seem to have come from you directly.
Okay. When you provided a statement to the press during your tenure at Tesla that was, quote, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, end of quote, did you expect that statement would be published by the press member?
Objection calls for speculation. You can answer.
Yes, but sometimes a journalist wouldn't use it in its entirety.
Okay. So could the third-party press modify the words of such a statement that you put in quotes in that way?
They could not. Or if they did, yeah, they could not.
Okay. What would happen if a press source modified something that you had released in quotes?
If we saw it, which would often be the challenge because there'd be so much press, we would sometimes contact them and ask them to update it.
And of course, during your tenure at Tesla, you had authority by virtue of your position to make statements that were, quote, attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, end of quote, correct?
Yes.
Who else had such authority?
Anyone in the communications team?
So everybody in the 40-member approximately communications team was authorized to release information to the press?
Most. I'd say there's a small number who had different roles where they weren't actually speaking to press, so they wouldn't.
Now, did Tesla at the time period that you were employed with the company have a public relations department? Or is that the same thing as the communications department?
Same thing.
All right. And the department had approximately 40 employees at the time?
I think so.
Can you don't need to tell me about every employee, but could you just describe generally, were they all similar in types of background and duties, or did they have different levels of duties?
Objection vague and ambiguous, but you can answer to the extent you can.
Different levels of duties. So the structure of it was, you had Dave who headed up corporate communications. He had a few people in his team. Depending on what the situation would be, they'd manage stories. We had someone else that headed up energy communications, someone else that headed up automotive, and within them they had a few people on their teams. We had someone that headed up communications for APAC, and someone that headed it up for Europe or EMEA, and in each one there'd be more people in their teams, and then we had one person based in Mexico for LATAM.
Ms. O'Brien, why did your employment with Tesla end?
I was exhausted.
So you made the decision to go?
Yes.
Did you already have your position with Facebook lined up?
No.
When did you join Facebook?
January this year.
January this year. And when was your official last date at Tesla?
Early September. I can't remember the final day.
Did your departure from Tesla have anything to do with the Martin Tripp matter?
No.
Your former colleague Dave Arnold is no longer with Tesla. Do you know why?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
Are you aware that Dave Arnold's no longer with Tesla?
I thought he was still there.
Oh, you do? Okay. I understand that you were under a high level of stress during your employment with Tesla. Is that accurate?
I would say it was just exhausting.
Did you, Ms. O'Brien, have multiple fainting episodes related to your work at Tesla?
I had twice.
Were you super burned? Go ahead, you want to finish?
Yeah, because one time I don't know if I'd actually say that they were related to the work that was happening at Tesla. Because one time both times I wasn't at Tesla in the office.
Okay. Were you super burned out at Tesla?
I don't know if I'd characterize it that way. I would just say I was exhausted.
Were you aware whether or not Mr. Musk characterized it as being super burned out?
I'm not aware.
What sort of things were stressful about your position at Tesla?
Objection mischaracterizes prior testimony. You can answer.
The hours were very long. The volume of media and just the inquiries that would come in would be very broad and extensive. And the team was incredibly, very talented, but very small for the amount of work. So it was a lot.
How many hours a week did you typically work?
I never calculated it, but
Was it more than 40?
yes.
More than 50?
Most days I would be start at around 5 and end at around 9, 8 or 9.
Did you work on weekends?
Some weekends, yes.
Did you feel that the expectations on you or your department were very demanding?
No different to anywhere else I've worked before. I think when you do comms, there is an expectation that, you know, you're doing work that has to be done well.
Well, did moving to Facebook reduce your stress level or anxiety level?
Not really. It's very similar work, actually, that I'm doing now. But I took 4 months off in between.
Mm-hmm. Have you had fainting spells at Facebook?
No.
Did you receive a severance package from Tesla?
No.
Do you have any ongoing relationship, professionally or otherwise, with Tesla?
Yes.
And would you describe that for us?
Primarily just keeping up with friends that are still there.
Okay. You're still close with various people that work at Tesla?
With some, yes.
Would you tell us who those are?
Sam Teller, Todd Marin, who is on the legal team, Dave Arnold, to be honest, most people in the communications team.
Well, at least one of those persons you mentioned is on the legal team, right?
Todd, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, others, Deepak, the CFO.
Would you tell us, Ms. O'Brien, in connection with your deposition here today, What did you do to prepare yourself for the deposition?
We met last night,
Okay. When you say we, who are you referring to?
counsel,
Okay.
Tesla counsel.
You met with your lawyers
Yeah.
last night.
Yeah.
And I'm not allowed to ask you what you spoke with them about. That's your privilege. But I can ask you, how long did you meet with them?
Just over 3 hours
Okay. And where did you meet with them at?
at Facebook at my office.
All right. Did you look at documents to prepare for your deposition?
We did.
Okay. And you did that during the course of yesterday?
Yes.
And did you also speak with anyone else other than your and Tesla's counsel?
No.
Okay. And would you tell me the actual lawyers that were in that meeting with you yesterday evening?
Alison. And I cannot remember the name of your colleague. Sorry.
Okay, it was someone else from Allison's firm?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else at the meeting?
No.
Have you had occasion to speak with anyone at Tesla about the fact that you were going to be deposed today?
Not recently. I think initially when I was first reached out to about this, I asked the legal team there if it was legitimate, because I often get media or other people coming to me asking me for things that are not.
So, I'm not sure I understand that. Could you just elaborate?
So I think I had a phone call seemingly out of the blue saying we need to talk about this case, and I just wanted to check with the legal team that that was a legitimate call from someone I should respond to.
Okay, and who did you receive such a phone call from?
It would have been Alison, I think.
Okay, I see. Was that before she became your counsel?
It was the very first call, so yes.
Okay, do you remember approximately when that was?
I don't. Early this year.
And when did you first formally engage Allison as your counsel?
A couple of months ago.
Did you sign an engagement letter?
Can't remember. I don't believe so.
Okay. Did you ever meet the defendant counterclaimant in this case, Martin Tripp?
No.
Have you read the complaint that Tesla filed against Mr. Tripp?
Not in full.
Okay. It's parts of it, it's been provided to you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a yes?
Yes.
And who provided it to you?
Alison.
Okay. And did she provide you with a copy of the answer and counterclaim filed by Mr. Tripp against Tesla?
I can't remember.
I'm going to object if you're asking what counsels provided to her. If you want to ask her if she saw documents that refreshed her recollection, that's fine, but asking her what documents we gave her is privileged, and I'll instruct her not to answer.
Have you ever seen a copy of the answer and counterclaim filed by Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Okay. And when did you review that?
Last night.
What is your general understanding of the allegations asserted by Tesla against Mr. Tripp?
Limited.
Okay. Well, what do you understand, if anything?
That there is an ongoing case. Yeah,
Nothing beyond that?
nothing really. Not the detail.
What is your understanding of the allegations asserted by Mr. Tripp against Tesla?
Not the detail.
All right. Do you recall anything about it?
Not really.
All right. As you probably surmised from my earlier questions, the main topic I want to discuss with you tonight is an incident in June of 2018 where somebody allegedly called Tesla's call center in Nevada about Mr. Tripp.
Mm-hmm.
You understand that?
Yes.
Would you please tell me what you recall about that incident generally, and then we'll talk about it specifically.
Yes. So it will be vague. So a call had been, I found out that a call had been made to the Gigafactory suggesting that Martin Tripp, who there'd been a previous story from a few weeks beforehand, was upset and was threatening to come to the Gigafactory and shoot people.
All right, I want to make sure I understand that. You said a few weeks. Had there been a threat a few weeks prior to this?
There hadn't been a threat, but that's how I knew who Martin Tripp was, because there'd been a story a few weeks beforehand relating to information that he had given to Business Insider.
All right, you used the term threat. I just want to understand the context in which you used the term threat.
I'm talking about threat for the phone call, not the previous story. But I'm connecting the story because that's who I knew who Martin Tripp was.
I see. And tell me what you recall about the threat.
As I said, that a call was made to the call center from a friend of Marty, someone pretending to be a friend of Marty Tripp, who said that he was upset, disturbed, heavily armed, and threatening to shoot the Gigafactory.
Okay. Do you know who that quote-unquote friend was?
I don't.
What efforts did Tesla make to ascertain the identity of that caller?
I don't.
Objection lacks foundation, calls for speculation. You can answer.
I don't know.
Let's fix that. Do you have any personal knowledge of what Tesla did, if anything, to ascertain who the caller was?
I believe there was an investigation, but I don't know much more beyond that,
Okay. And how do you know there was an investigation?
because I spoke to the security team.
Okay. Were you a part of the investigation?
No.
Did you interview the call center person who received the call?
I did the following day.
Okay. Was that before or after you released information to the press?
After.
Do you recall, and by the following day, I assume you mean June 21st, 2018?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately what time that day you spoke with the call center employee?
I don't.
And do you remember the name of the call center employee?
Began with an S.
Shamara Bell?
Shamara Bell. Yeah.
And how long did you speak with Miss Bell?
5 minutes, perhaps 10 minutes, maybe longer.
What did you discuss with her?
I was concerned that media would be coming her way because of the story and the situation. So I wanted her to know that if that did happen, that she could contact anyone in the communications team. We were also in a situation where where media did not believe that the call had been made. So I was asking her if she felt comfortable with us sharing the statement that she'd provided to the security team, or if she would be comfortable talking to media. I think her manager was on the call because I wanted to make sure that she was comfortable with that. She was not comfortable talking to media, but she was okay for the statement to be shared.
Did you speak with her about anything else?
I don't believe so, but I can't remember.
Did any part of your communication involve trying to investigate what had happened in her phone call?
I can't remember.
Did you make any notes of your interview of her?
I can't remember.
Is it your practice normally in a situation like that to make notes?
It would depend on where I was at the time and if I would have been able to do that. But I think I would have been at the factory at the time, so it wouldn't have been possible.
And when you say it wouldn't have been possible for you to make notes, can you explain?
Because I was likely in steel toe boots and a hard hat on the factory floor somewhere. Yeah, I can't remember if I took notes.
Again, the incident of the alleged phone call, for point of reference, was June 20, 2018. What do you recall about when that day you first learned of the alleged phone call?
It was towards like late afternoon that day. I can't remember what else was happening that day, but I can remember there being something else that we were all quite focused and working on. And yeah, so I found out quite late in the day. if I'm remembering that right.
So do you have a sense of the timing? Are you suggesting afternoon or evening?
Like late afternoon, early evening.
So perhaps 4, 5, 6?
Around then, yeah.
Okay. And who did you first hear about it from?
I think from Elon.
Okay. And what did he tell you about the event?
I think it was an email.
And do you recall what the email said?
No, but I think he had emailed Julia Wong at The Guardian, and
Before he spoke with you?
yes, and I'd been added to that email.
I see. So your understanding is Mr. Musk spoke with the reporter at The Guardian before you knew about the incident.
Yes,
And then he followed up his communication with her with an email to her wherein he copied you.
yes, yeah. So to me, it's the same thing. So I don't think they spoke on the phone. I think the journalist had contacted Elon and asked him directly. Journalists would do that sometimes. And that he had responded, and in his response, he'd included the information about what had happened at the Gigafactory and had CC'd me.
All right, I just want to make sure I clearly understand your testimony. So are you saying that you don't know whether there was a phone call between him and the reporter,
That's right.
but you knew there was an email exchange in which you were copied by him?
That's right.
The document that I've handed you, exhibit number 1, we talked about the first page a little bit, but it's a series of documents that were produced to us by Tesla from its files. Do you generally recognize the package of information that's attached to this email from you dated June 20, 2018?
I do.
Now, you indicated that you had first learned of this from Mr. Musk's email in the late afternoon or early evening. Here, you're sending Ms. Wong an email yourself on June 20 at 5:55 p.m. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you have a sense of how much earlier than that time you first learned of this event?
At the most, perhaps about 2 hours, but probably, yeah, can't remember exactly.
So at most 2 hours, but it could have been less?
It could have been less, yeah.
And within that time period of 2 hours or less, you drafted this attributed to a Tesla spokesperson quote?
Yes.
And you circulated it to others at Tesla to review?
I can't remember. But that would be the normal practice.
I thought earlier you'd suggested that you had ran it by Mr. Arnold and then also someone in the legal department. Is that correct?
But how that would sometimes happen, we'd either be together, like sat next to each other, so I wouldn't have sent an email round and circulated.
I see.
I can't remember if I did that. It could have been that Todd, who was legal, and Dave, who was in the communications team, was sitting with me, because that's how sometimes we would do that.
All right, just so I accurately characterize what you just said,
Yeah.
there were more than just you working on this quote, but it's possible that you could have all been in the same room working on it together.
That's accurate.
Let's talk about the on-background part of it. It says, after being caught hacking Tesla's confidential and trade secret information and transferring it to third parties, Mr. Tripp is now claiming he is a whistleblower. Do you know who wrote that statement?
I think it could have been Todd Marin in the legal team.
And did you do anything to ascertain what was meant by caught hacking Tesla's confidential and trade secret information?
What do you mean by ascertain?
Well, you released this information to the press, correct?
Correct.
What did you understand you were communicating when you said after being caught hacking Tesla's confidential and trade secret information? Did you understand what you were communicating?
At the time, yes.
Okay. What did you understand you were communicating?
Exactly what it says.
All right. But when you say hacking Tesla's confidential and trade secret information, could you explain to me what you meant by that?
By the word hacking in particular.
Sure.
That that something had been, if I'm remembering this correctly, because this was a year ago, that something had been hacked, entered into, or kind of changed in some way to be able to access information.
Okay, access information from where?
From the kind of whole part of the story was the fact that there was information that had been gathered from various sources. I can't remember exactly how the information was pulled out of systems within Tesla.
When you communicated statements like this, did you simply rely upon what others told you in communicating this, or did you try to understand it yourself?
A lot of the time you'd be relying on subject matter experts from across the company.
And so who did you rely upon in connection with this statement we've just been talking about?
So some of this wasn't collated by me personally. It would have been from others, so Todd and Dave and others that were working on the story itself. It feels to me like some of this was material that we'd previously used on the story that was 2 weeks earlier.
Okay, again, you mentioned others, but with respect to this specific statement we're looking at, do you know who that came from?
I can't remember.
Okay, and this event was less than a year ago. It was about 11 months ago. What is your? Do you feel like you have a good recollection of these events as you sit here today?
Objection, vague and ambiguous. You can answer.
Not incredibly.
Okay. Well, Counsel, what's vague and ambiguous about that question? I want to correct it.
What do you mean when you say, do you feel like you have a good recollection? What's a good recollection?
Well, do you feel like you remember, you have a good sense of what happened on July 20, or June 20 and June 21st of last year when you were involved in this event?
Same objection, vague and ambiguous, but you can answer. It's also argumentative.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard to quantify that. I can remember some parts of it, but it's, to me, 11 months or nearly 12 months is quite a long time.
All right. And until you were notified that you were going to be deposed in connection with this case, did you have occasion to think about or go back and look into this matter?
No.
Let's look forward in the document. There is, at the bottom of the page, it says, on all of these issues, Tripp is either telling the truth, either not telling the truth, or he simply has no idea what he is talking about. And then it goes on to say, on June 20, 2018 at 5:29 p.m., Elon Musk wrote, and then you have that quote that's embedded above in the top of the email. Do you see that?
Still on the first page?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Does that suggest to you, by virtue of the quote, that the attributed to a Tesla spokesperson statement at the top of the page was actually written by Elon Musk?
Objection, mischaracterizes the document, assumes facts, not in evidence.
Counsel, I'm going to ask you, under the local rules, to restrain your objections to form, because that's the proper objection. These speaking objections that you make with the long, windy narrative statements to lead the witness are improper.
You might want to check the California local rules. I know you're an Arizona lawyer, but
No,
here in California, objection to form does not preserve your objections, and you have to give the grounds for your objections, so I will continue to do so.
Okay, well, we're in Nevada court, and the Nevada rules prohibit that conduct.
Well,
Okay.
the deposition is here in California. I'm going to object to, I'll give the grounds. These aren't the only grounds. I'm not giving a speaking objection. I'm merely giving the grounds.
Well, I disagree. They're speaking objections and they're obstructing my deposition, and ask that you stop.
Okay, I'll continue with my proper objections. But would now be a good time for a break?
No, I'm not finished with my line of questioning on this page.
Well, I need a break at the moment.
Can I
so-
finish with the two questions I have related to this quote?
Yes, you can finish with the two questions you have.
Ms. O'Brien, you see that in the bottom quote, it says, "I was just told we received a call at the Gigafactory that he was going to come back and shoot people." Isn't that very similar to what a quote is used in the attributed to a Tesla spokesperson above?
It both has the word shoot.
Right. And the quote that Mr. Musk used was "shoot people." How did that become "shoot the place up" in the above quote? Do you remember who changed those words?
I believe that's what the information that we received from the security team.
All right. This would be a good time for a break.
Yeah, let's do that.
We are going off the record at approximately 5:50 p.m. We are back on the record at approximately 6:02 p.m.
Thank you. Ms. O'Brien, now that we're back on record, I want to follow up where we left off today, where we left off before the break. Are you still represented by counsel?
Yes.
And would the witness please tell me who your counsel is here today?
Alison.
Allison, would the witness tell me what her last name is?
Don't know. Sorry, Alison.
Fair enough. Let's begin by going back to the discussion we were having about June 20th of 2018. And were you aware that, well, first of all, in the statement that you helped craft that's attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, you communicated, "Police have been notified." When you say police, did you mean to say police?
That's what we received from the security team.
Okay. And was it the police or was it a sheriff's department?
It would have been the sheriff's department.
Okay. Because the Tesla factory is not within a city limits, is that right?
I don't know.
And do you know what the sheriff's office involvement was?
Only what I'd heard from the security team, which is that they'd been notified.
Did you have any personal interaction with the sheriff's office?
Can't remember. No, I
Is
can't
it possible you did?
remember. It's possible, but I feel like it's something I would remember.
So you think it's probably
I think
unlikely
it's
that you did?
unlikely.
And are you aware of what investigation, if any, the sheriff's office performed on June 20th?
Only very high level, again, the information from the security team, being that they were looking into it.
And do you know when they concluded their investigation of the matter?
I don't.
Do you know if they reached a determination that there was no credible threat involved?
I do.
And when did they reach that conclusion?
The following day, maybe 2 days later.
So
From memory?
your belief is they reached that conclusion on June 21st or June 22nd?
At some point, yeah. It wasn't the same day.
And are you sure about that?
I'm not sure of anything, I'm afraid, because it's so long ago.
Your communication with Miss Wong that we're looking at right now was at 5:55 p.m. Did you ask anybody, either within your department or outside of your department at Tesla, to check with the sheriff's office to ascertain the status of the matter before this was released?
I spoke to the security team, who were the people that were speaking to the sheriff's department. So if anything had changed beyond what was in here, they would have notified me.
All right, well, you spoke with them. You sent this email at 5:55 p.m. How much earlier before then did you speak with the security team?
It would have been very quickly after getting this being looped into the email that Elon sent.
Okay, so he sent it at 5:29, so sometime between 5:29 and 5:55,
Yeah.
you would have spoken with the security, is that
Yes,
correct?
yeah.
And again, just so we have a clear record, let me finish.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, no problem. let's mark this, please. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my highlighted copy. Let me give you that. Don't. Thank you.
Good save.
It's my cheesy way of having him put the numbers on my exhibit. Just easy.
Smart.
Ms. O'Brien, you told me about an email that Mr. Musk sent to Ms. Wong that you were copied on. Is that what we're looking at here at 5:29 p.m.?
I believe so, yes.
Was it customary in let's say, at about this time, June of 2018, that Mr. Musk would communicate with the press without conferring with you first on such matters?
Not a huge amount, but it would happen.
Okay. Did you like that when that happened?
No,
Okay. And why not?
because it's much easier when I can communicate with the press.
That's your area of expertise.
Correct.
Did you like it when he made this communication with the press?
No,
And tell me why.
because I didn't know about it beforehand. It looks like he sent this to me a couple of minutes before sending it to the journalist. I can't remember seeing the difference in between. So it's always good to know beforehand. And media would sometimes send Elon emails directly and not include anyone in the communications team to try and get a response. And Elon would not often, but sometimes he would respond. So it was just never ideal.
Okay. Now going back to my original question, and I think where you were starting to go was, you didn't like him having sent this email. Would you tell me why you didn't like the substance of this email and the way he communicated it?
Objection mischaracterizes prior testimony. But you
Let
can,
me rephrase it. Did you not like the substance of what he communicated to the press in this email?
It was more the fact that he had contacted a journalist without giving me a heads up first.
Well, after you reviewed the email and accepting the fact that he had communicated with the journalist before reaching out to you, did you have any concerns with the language or the description that he used in this email?
No, I wouldn't say concerns. I would say more the fact that he's shared information before I was aware of any of it.
Did you have an opinion that more investigation should have been done into Martin Tripp's involvement or non-involvement in this phone call matter before this statement was released to the public?
As in the email being sent or this statement?
Well, fair enough. Let's start with Mr. Musk's email.
I don't know with the conversations that Elon had with the security team, but I would assume that and I did assume at the time that he had conversations with the security team. That he would have been notified somehow that this had happened.
Okay, so with that said, are you saying that you had no concern about whether or not that matter had been appropriately investigated before Martin Tripp's name was released to the public as someone going to shoot up the Gigafactory?
objection asked and answered. Argumentative.
No, I don't think it's been answered yet.
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Yes, of course. So I understand that he didn't run this by you first.
Yeah.
And I understand your assumption that he was talking with people on the security team. My question to you is, did you feel comfortable that this statement had been released without any further investigation as to Martin Tripp and his involvement?
Objection argumentative. You can still answer.
I don't know the conversations that Elon had with the security team, but at the time I would have I assumed that there would have been a conversation between the two of them. Elon wasn't someone that he would have sought out information like that.
Okay, but you understand, again, you're veering off in a different direction than my question. My question was, were you comfortable with this statement?
Objection asked and answered.
No, it hasn't been.
This statement in here,
Yeah, we're staying right there first.
With this email.
Yes, were you comfortable with Mr. Musk's email?
As in terms of actually what the content of it rather than actually what he did with the email.
Well,
'Cause
let's
to me this-
separate
to me,
them.
yeah.
Let's talk about the content. Were
Yeah.
you comfortable with the content of the email that Mr. Musk sent?
No.
And why not?
Just because it seems, it's a detailed email to share with a journalist.
And when you say it's a detailed email, in what respect, Mr. O'Brien?
From even small things of, the to and fro between two people.
All right. And why did that bother you?
Because it's information that you wouldn't, I would rather have had, the information of the situation kind of planned out. I'd rather have sent something more like this with the background information, the statement.
When you say this, now you're referring
I'm
back to
referring to
Exhibit 1.
Exhibit
Right. And sticking with Exhibit 2, the email from Mr. Musk, would you have preferred that the sheriff's office had completed their investigation before Mr. Tripp was disclosed to the press as the person who was allegedly going to shoot the place up?
I've not thought about that before.
Meaning you didn't think about that at the time?
Well, because the email had already been sent.
Okay. But after you read it, did you think about, well, maybe we should have vetted that better or waited till the sheriff's department investigated first?
Objection argumentative. You can answer.
No,
because-
we're going to fix the objection because I want the record to be clean. When you read that statement, did you have any concerns personally that that was released before the sheriff's department had completed their investigation?
I didn't. I didn't because I felt that Elon would have, and there were conversations as well aside from this email with me speaking to the security team, and I know that they had spoken to, or if I'm remembering that right, I'm pretty sure that they had conversations with Elon about it as well. I'd be surprised if they didn't. So I felt that the information was accurate.
Okay, but how did you get your understanding that the sheriff had discussions with Mr. Musk about this?
Not the sheriff, the security team.
The security team?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now because you made a distinction between the two exhibits, let's turn back to exhibit number 1.
And I'm doing that just because in my world, a statement is attributed to a Tesla spokesperson in quotes. So that's why I'm kind of separating them out.
Okay, and then
If that
that's
makes
fine
sense.
with me if
Great.
you clarify,
Yeah.
so thank you. Now, with respect to Exhibit 1 and the statement that was attributed to a Tesla spokesperson, let me ask you the same question. Did you have any thoughts at the time you sent this email that we perhaps should wait until the sheriff's office had completed their investigation before disclosing Mr. Tripp's identity?
No.
And why not?
Because an email had already been sent with that information in there to a journalist. And I'd spoken to the security team and had got the information from them.
So are you basically saying the cat was out of the bag and
Objection argumentative. Mischaracterizes prior testimony.
you can answer?
I'm saying that I'd got the information from the subject matter experts who were the security team, and I felt that the information in the statement was accurate.
The information in the statement was accurate insofar as Mr. Tripp was the person that was going to be coming to the Gigafactory?
The information in terms of that they received a phone call from a friend telling us that Mr. Tripp.
Did you not feel, based upon your journal or your communications experience, did you have any sense as to whether it was responsible or irresponsible to continue to release Mr. Tripp's name without having had the sheriff's office complete the investigation to determine if there really was any threat?
I didn't because the name had already been released.
And it had already been released by Mr. Musk, correct?
Yes.
this statement that we've been talking about, attributed to the Tesla spokesperson, as you sit here today, is Tesla's official statement 100% true and accurate in your belief?
I believe it's accurate.
In every respect?
The part on shooting the place up in quotation marks, I believe after that statement was issued, it was confirmed that those exact words in those parentheses weren't word by word exactly what was said, but I still feel that the tone of the statement and actually what the statement is conveying is correct.
Let me ask you this. If you had become aware that the sheriff's department had concluded there was no threat posed by Mr. Tripp, would you have then felt comfortable releasing the attributed to Tesla spokesperson statement that you did?
Objection, vague and incomplete hypothetical.
Oh, so you mean beforehand? Because the sheriff's department did issue a statement saying that on this.
My question is, if you had been aware that the sheriff's office had determined that Mr. Tripp was no threat to anyone at Tesla, would you have nevertheless released that statement?
Objection, assumes facts not in evidence and incomplete hypothetical. You can still answer.
Probably parts of it, because a phone call was still made. From the information that I'd received from the security team was credible. Like I can actually remember on the day, genuinely being concerned.
Let me ask you this: as a communications professional, would you agree with me that if it turned out as it did, that Mr. Tripp was no threat to anyone at Tesla, such a statement nevertheless is a very harmful statement to make about a person?
Objection, compound, assumes facts not in evidence. You can still answer.
I don't know if I'd articulate it that way, because I still believe that Mr. Tripp, that this phone call was made, and that the person that made the phone call did say that they were a friend of Marty Tripp, and he was very distraught and was threatening to.
But as you sit here today, you still don't know who made the phone call, do you?
I don't.
You don't even know if the phone call was made by Elon Musk as a prank, do you?
Objection, argumentative.
I think that's not that. I think that is very, very unlikely, considering the conversation that I had with the call center person who took the call.
But you don't know, because the caller wouldn't even leave a name, that it was a serious caller, do you?
Objection, argumentative.
I don't know, because I didn't take the call.
And did the fact that the caller wouldn't leave a name and didn't want to be involved give you any reservations about whether you should release this statement to the public?
It didn't, because a caller still called and said they're a friend of Marty Tripp, that there was a threat. I genuinely believed that there was a threat.
Are you saying you genuinely believed, or you're saying the caller said that?
I personally did, because of other things that had happened in the run-up to this situation. The fact that a story, information had been leaked to a journalist 2 weeks beforehand. This was part of something that had been ongoing for a while.
So the fact that information had been released to a journalist, in your mind, substantiated the potential risk that Mr. Tripp could come in and shoot people in the Gigafactory?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, you're saying that part of why you believe this had some credibility was because of things that had happened in the past leading up to this event, right?
In terms of the fact I knew who Marty Tripp was, I knew that there was an investigation that was ongoing, yes.
And how does that have anything to do with the threat that somebody was going to come in and shoot up the Gigafactory?
Because they said they were a friend of Marty Tripp.
Did it give you any reason for concern or suspicion about the call? Well, first of all, did you learn at some point that the caller called on a blocked number?
Objection assumes facts, not evidence.
No, it's a question. Did you ever learn that the caller called on a blocked number?
No,
Did you come to learn that fact afterwards?
I don't believe so, but I can't remember.
Okay. The official statement suggests that we received a call from a friend of Mr. Tripp. Why, in crafting the official statement, did you not state that the caller stated he was a friend of Mr. Tripp?
I can't remember.
Do you see the nuanced difference between the two?
I do.
One says, we received a call from a friend of Mr. Tripp as a statement of fact, and what I ask you says that basically someone called and said they were a friend of Mr. Tripp. Do you see a
I
qualitative
do.
difference?
I do. Yeah.
With that pointed out, do you know why the language that was used was chosen instead of the one I suggested?
I don't, but it could be because the information in this statement is the information that we got from the security team, who are the people that were dealing with the call at the time. So I could make assumptions as to why, but it could be because the information that we received was the fact that the call came through from a friend rather than the call potentially came through from someone that may have been a friend.
Well, did the security team tell you that the caller was in fact a friend of Mr. Tripp?
I can't remember.
And in reality, then and today, you have no idea who the caller was, right?
Correct.
Would you agree with me as a general proposition that the caller could have been a friend or the caller could have been an enemy of Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
The caller could have been someone who knew Mr. Tripp, or he could have been a random person who merely read Tesla's complaint against Mr. Tripp and who had never met him before, correct?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation. You can answer.
Yep.
Are you aware if anyone at Tesla did any follow-up investigation to see if they could identify the person who called?
I believe so, but I can't remember.
What can you tell me about that when you say I believe so?
I had spoken to the security team a number of times during this time to obviously get as much detail as possible. I just can't remember the exact parts of those conversations.
Can you remember any parts here today as you testify under oath?
More just, I think everything that I've said so far, really.
Do you know what was ultimately concluded, if anything, by any internal investigation of Tesla as to who made the call?
I can't remember.
Do you recall ever having been told what the conclusions were of Tesla's investigation, whether you recall the details or not?
I don't.
Did you have concerns when this matter was reported to you that the call center, the phone call was not recorded by Tesla?
I can't remember.
Did that cross your mind?
No.
In your statement, the official statement you put out, again, you used this term, quote, unquote, shoot the place up. Was that the statement that came directly from Shamara Bell?
That's the information I got from the security team, who I believe spoke to Shamara Bell.
Okay, who on the security team gave that information?
I was talking to, at the time there was a chap called Jeff Jones and another guy called Nick. It would have been one of them.
Okay, but you don't recall
I can't
who
remember
told
which
you?
one. Yeah.
All right. but it would have been one of those two that told you that was the exact language Miss Bell used.
Yes.
I think you indicated you may have subsequently had a conversation with Miss Bell.
Yes.
Did you ask her if the terminology that was used in the phone call was, quote, shoot the place up, end of quote?
I can't remember, but I don't think so, just because of the nature of the conversation that we were having wasn't on the actual specifics. It was more because at that point media didn't believe us that a phone call had even taken place. So that's why I was calling her, to address that.
Did you at any time, either before this press release was issued or afterwards, attempt to verify the use of those words, shoot the place up?
I would have done with the security team.
Okay, and when you say you would have verified, what did that entail?
I can't remember. It could have been an email or a phone conversation to try and get the accurate information for the statement.
But you recall specifically that you tried to verify that language, shoot the place up?
I believe so.
In your statement, why did Tesla place the phrase shoot the place up in quotations?
I can't remember specifically, but I believe it's because that's what we believed was said as part of the phone conversation.
Did you make the decision to put that language in quotes?
I can't remember.
Do you know who would have made that decision?
It would have been either myself, Dave, Arnold, or legal.
Is it likely that you made the decision to put that in quotes?
I can't remember.
But certainly you sent that quotation out.
Yes.
As is.
Yes.
Would you mark this, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, you've been handed what's been marked as Exhibit 3. And this is an email you sent to Elon Musk on June 20th at 5:31 p.m. This would have been like 2 minutes after his email to the press, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you say, I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Why did you send that email?
Probably to make sure that, to hope that Elon didn't continue emailing the journalist.
Again, because you were very unhappy with his communication.
Yeah.
Was it common for you to make a statement like this to Mr. Musk after he had made a statement to the press? In other words, I'll take it from here?
Relatively, yeah.
After you saw his email, did you call Mr. Musk?
I don't think so.
Did you have any communications with Mr. Musk on the day of June 20th about this event?
I think so, because I think I may have been in the factory this day, and I think he was there as well.
And when
So
you
it
say
could
the
have been
factory, which factory?
In Fremont.
That's in Fremont, California.
That's correct.
Not the Gigafactory that.
Sorry. Yes, just to be clear, the Fremont factory in California.
And so but do you recall if you spoke with him or not spoke with him on that day?
I think I did, but I can't remember how much detail on this particular story.
All right, so you got his email, I think, what did we establish, 5:29, and you are releasing an email to the press yourself less than a half an hour later, is that correct?
That's correct.
When you saw his email, which you were unhappy about, it concerned you, right?
Yeah.
Objection mischaracterizes prior testimony.
Did it concern you?
Yes.
And so much so that you sent this 2-minute response to Mr. Musk, I'll take it from here, remember that?
Yes.
And did you not go meet with Mr. Musk or pick up the phone and call Mr. Musk to talk to him in detail about this threat at the Gigafactory?
I spoke to the security team pretty quickly. I think Elon and I were probably quite in a similar vicinity at this time, because if I was in the Fremont factory, which I think I was, he would have been very nearby. I just can't remember the detail if we had a conversation about this in particular.
All right, so in between the time you saw his first email and the time you sent your email, did you or did you not have a conversation with Mr. Musk?
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember. Are you talking about in the 2 minutes between these, or
No,
in
I'm
between
talking about between 5:29 and
One at a time,
5:55.
please.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about between 5:29 and 5:55.
I can't remember.
Wouldn't it surprise you to not have had a conversation about such an important matter with him?
It would.
Would it have been your practice in a situation like this involving an alleged threat to shoot people at the Gigafactory that you wouldn't have gone directly to the top and talked to Mr. Musk?
I would assume so. I just can't remember.
Did you make any notes when you talked to Mr. Musk?
Objection assumes facts, not evidence.
I can't remember.
All right, you don't, so you're saying as you sit here today, you don't remember whether you did or you didn't have a conversation between 5:29 and 5:55 of that date?
Correct.
Do you recall if you had a conversation with Mr. Musk at any time during that day about this event?
I can't remember.
You just can't recall any of the details?
Yeah.
You-
Yeah, because we would talk. We would be in quite regular contact, depending on if Elon was in the factory that day, if I was in the factory that day. I just can't remember if we had a conversation, and if so, what the specifics of it were.
But you do recall speaking with the security team between 5:29 and 5:55, is
I
that
do.
correct?
Yes.
Do you believe you would have called the security team but not Mr. Musk after seeing Mr. Musk's email?
I have a feeling that either I called them or they would have called me and given me the information. I have a memory, but it's a vague memory of speaking with the legal team as well, who had found...
I'll caution you to not disclose communications with the legal team.
Yeah.
Okay, so you recall just speaking with the legal team that day?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall speaking with Mr. Musk at all?
I can't remember. Sorry.
All right. Do you recall speaking with Mr. Musk on June 21st about this matter?
I can't remember, but I would be surprised if I didn't.
Okay. And if you spoke to him, well, I'm not going to have you just don't
I just
recall.
can't remember it. Sorry.
Do you recall if you spoke with him on June 23rd about this matter?
I can't remember, but I would be surprised if I didn't.
Given the nature of the matter, that someone had alleged that an employee or ex-employee of Tesla was going to shoot people up and that was released to the press, would that be the kind of matter that would have caused you to have definitely gone to the top to speak to Mr. Musk, or can you say?
I mean, absolutely. I just can't remember if I did.
Would that have been the kind of matter that was so serious that you would have made notes concerning it?
Yes, maybe, yeah, but I can't remember doing that because this all happened quite quickly.
Well, we're talking about over the course of 3 days, June
Got it.
21 to 23. Given the nature of the matter, you don't recall as you sit here today whether you made any notes concerning this matter?
I would have sent emails, I would have spoken to people,
Okay. What I'm talking about is, do you recall making any personal notes
as in writing notes down.
or typing them?
Probably did, yes,
Okay, and where would those notes have gone?
in my email.
Okay, would you have made notes in like a document in your file, maybe a Word document?
No, I would normally do notes in drafts in my email.
As you were trying over the course of June 20th through the 22nd, let's say, to piece all these facts together, do you think you kept a log of developments and contacts that you had made so you'd keep your story straight?
I don't remember doing that myself, but other people in my team may have done.
Okay, but that would just be guessing, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Jeff Jones or Nick Jacinto. Did you talk to them about any investigation that they did and get any details from them?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
No, let's fix that. Did you talk to Nick Jacinto and Jeff Jones about what investigation, if any, they had done?
Same objection, it's vague and ambiguous.
Do you mean on the call itself?
Yes.
Yes. Multiple times. I just can't remember which one, who I spoke to on particular days, but we were in regular contact.
Did you have multiple calls with them before you put out the 5:55 p.m. press release?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, were they both on that call? Or calls?
I can't remember.
You didn't make notes?
If I did, they were in the draft, like just drafting in an email draft.
All right. Would you please mark this as the next exhibit? It would be 4, correct?
Correct.
Ms. O'Brien, I've handed you another document that was produced by Tesla, which appears to be a string of emails, some of which you were copied on and ultimately you sent to someone named Alan Cooper. Do you want to take a minute just to
Yeah, if you
peruse it?
don't mind.
Please do. Do you need more time?
Sorry, I'm nearly there.
I'm sorry?
2 more
Sure,
seconds,
of
sorry.
course.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Ms. O'Brien, let's begin with the first page, which is an email you sent at 6:38 p.m. on Wednesday, June 20th to Alan Cooper. Who is Alan Cooper?
He is the Director of Communications for Energy.
For who?
Energy,
What
the
is
energy
that?
products. So that's Powerwall, Solar Roof.
A department of Tesla?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. At the beginning, when I was saying there was someone that did automotive communications, someone that did energy communications, Alan's the energy guy.
And he's someone at the Gigafactory in Nevada?
No, he's based at the factory in Fremont with us. He was one of the small team that was based with me.
All right, and you recognize that this email would have been sent by you after you had sent your email to the press?
Yes.
And you start out by saying, I agree, yeah, the facts on this one are pretty serious. What did you mean by that?
I feel like I would have meant, and again, I'm putting caveats around this just because it was a long time ago. I can't remember specifically what I would have felt. But I would have been agreeing with Alan because that media are going to root for the little guy in a story. Because at the time, the UAW and other unions were really doing quite a concerted effort to unionize the factory. So we were dealing with multiple kind of unionization tactics at the same time. So I was very aware of the fact that, yeah, media do tend to root for the little guy. I'm quoting him directly.
Well, you responded to his email a minute after he sent his to you.
Yeah.
And in his email, he says, if we don't have clear proof of intent behind this threat, we're slipping into an easy cry of, quote, slander, end of quote, from press. And we'll be fighting a multi-front battle. Do you see that?
I do, yeah.
And what was your interpretation of what he meant by intent?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
I can't remember.
Well, you say I agree. What were you agreeing with?
I believe I was agreeing with the fact that media tend to root for the little guy. Because we'd seen that, we'd experienced that with lots of the union stories that we were also working on at a similar time.
Well, did you interpret his comment to suggest that with the limited evidence that existed out there, that people would be suspicious of throwing Marty Tripp's name out to the public under these circumstances?
Objection mischaracterizes the document, incomplete hypothetical.
I can't remember, but I think the fact the fact that I said, yeah, the facts on this one are pretty serious. Again, can't remember all of this, but I did believe the facts that we had of this entire story, the entire episode as a whole, were serious.
Well, let's look at the email immediately below that, and it's an email from you to Dave Arnold and Gina Antonini at 5:42:06 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes,
This would have been before your release to the press, correct?
correct.
And in this email, you're saying Todd is reviewing the information you sent through Dave. What is that information you're talking about?
I'm going to object that it calls for attorney-client privilege communications as to what the substance of that Todd's reviewing. The fact that he's reviewing something isn't privileged, but the substance of it, and I'm going to instruct not to answer.
And you're going to follow that instruction?
Yes.
The you that you're referring to, who is that?
I'm guessing that is Dave.
Well, you're saying the information you sent through Dave. You wouldn't mean information Dave sent through Dave, right? So does that suggest to you that you is somebody else?
No, I think that's just poor grammar on my side, I'm guessing. Todd is reviewing the information you sent through, Dave.
You go on in your next paragraph to say, in addition, we have this as a statement that we can use. Elon just gave this info to Julia at The Guardian. Do you see that?
Yes.
And when you say we have this as a statement we can use, what were you intending to convey there?
I can't remember.
And then you have a quote, and you indicate this is the quote that Elon just gave to Julia. Is that right?
Yes.
But that's not exactly the quote that Elon gave to Julia, is it?
That's right. That's, as in, what you're saying is correct.
So who altered or embellished this statement?
Objection argumentative.
Okay, who altered the statement?
Objection vague and ambiguous.
All right, let's break it apart. Let's line them up. Would you take exhibit number 2 and put it in front of you along with exhibit 4? In the statement that Mr. Musk sent to Julia Wong, he said, we received a call at the Gigafactory that he was going to come back and shoot people. Do you see that? The top of exhibit 2.
Yes.
That was Mr. Musk's exact quote to the press, correct?
Yes.
And then in the quote you attributed to Mr. Musk, you put in quotes, inside the quote, shoot the place up, into quote. Do you see that?
Objection mischaracterizes the document.
Yes.
Let's clarify that. Aren't you saying here that Elon just gave this information to Julia?
Yeah, I am saying that, but that's not accurate.
And then you put it in quotes, don't you?
I put the whole statement in quotes.
Right.
Yes.
And the reason you put it in quotes was why?
Because then it's on the record.
All right, but don't you normally put something in quotes if you're attributing it to somebody who said it?
Normally at Tesla, you'd put a statement in quotes.
Okay, doesn't it have to be a statement that somebody actually made?
When we would send a statement to a journalist, we'd often send it to them, the entire statement as a whole, in quotation marks.
Let me see if I can understand that with you. You say Elon just gave this information to Julia, and then you have a statement that's in quotes. You would agree with me as you sit here today, this is not the same language that Mr. Musk used in his email communication of less than 10 minutes previous to Julia Wong, correct?
That is correct, but I think that's why I probably have said we have this as a statement that we can use. Elon just gave this info to Julia at The Guardian.
And that means what? I'm not sure I'm following.
That means that the statement, which is below, is a statement that we can use. Elon has given this information, this info to Julia at The Guardian. I think the team would not have expected, I could be wrong, but I doubt they would have expected Elon would send a statement drafted like that with the quotation marks specifically to a journalist. It would be more that he would send, sort of do things like he did, forwarded an email or sort of one-word answers. It would never sort of be done in that way.
The statement that you insert in your email following your statement, Elon just gave this info to Julia at The Guardian, has 2 sets of quotes. The entire paragraph is in a quote, and the term shoot the place up is in another quote, inside the quote.
Yeah.
Did somebody use the term shoot the place up?
That's the same statement that we have here. Is that right? Yeah.
Same statement that we have where?
It's the same statement on Exhibit 1.
Right, I understand that, because that's your writing, right?
That's the statement.
Yes. Exhibit 1 is your authorship, the attributed to a Tesla spokesperson. We already talked about that, right?
Yes.
And that's the same language you use in your email that we've been looking at, that's Exhibit 4, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
But that is not the language that Mr. Musk used in his email that we looked at, which is Exhibit number 2, correct?
Yes, correct.
Remember to wait for the full question.
So what I want to understand, Ms. O'Brien, is who came up with the term, quote, shoot the place up, end of quote?
That was the information that we got from the security team.
And do you have any idea? Okay, so are you telling me that somebody on the security team used those exact words to you?
Yes.
And who used those exact words to you?
It would have either been Jeff or Nick. I can't remember which one.
But it was definitely one or the other used those exact words.
Yeah.
And that's why you put it in quotes within the quote that you released.
Yes.
Robert, can we take a break whenever's convenient?
Anytime you'd like.
How about let's do one now?
We are going off the record at approximately 6:52. We are back on the record at approximately 6:59 p.m.
Thank you. I think before the break, you had suggested that we consider whether or not to take a dinner break. What are your thoughts after conferring with the witness?
I was thinking that we would do one more session and then take a dinner break and then come back.
All right, that's fine by me. Is that fine with everybody else? Okay. All right, let's go back on record with the deposition. Ms. O'Brien, during the break, did you happen to have occasion to find out what your lawyer's last name is?
Nope.
Okay. What about your other lawyer from Allison's office, his last name? Do you know what her last name is?
No.
Okay. Would you please mark this as our next exhibit, please?
This is Exhibit 5.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, you've been handed a document that's been marked as Exhibit 5, and you'll see on the first page is an email from someone named Drew Harwell at the Washington Post to you and to two of your team members on June 20th at 6:11 p.m. Do you see that?
I do.
And in the email, she says, Dave, thank you. The top statement is a huge claim. We can't report unsubstantiated claims like that. Can you support it? And can you make the background claims on the record? We can't include the rebuttals if they're not on the record, but I'd really like to be able to include the response. What was the context for that communication?
I can't remember it fully because I believe Dave was talking to Drew. I think there may have been phone conversations as well.
Were you a participant in any of the phone conversations?
I don't think so.
Did you have an understanding of what was meant by unsubstantiated claims like that?
Yes.
What was your understanding?
That they wanted more information, and I believe that Drew wanted the police to confirm it.
So when you understood unsubstantiated claims to mean a reference to the shoot the Gigafactory up incident?
Yes.
And then if we look at the email below that, it looks like, unlike a lot of emails where people print it out, this email appears to be a later email, not an earlier email. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's
Yep.
9:01 p.m.
Yeah.
And it was copied to you.
Yes.
And it says, it has the attributed to a Tesla spokesperson statement, the one you had approved and authored, right?
Yeah.
Did you review this email communication from Dave Arnold to approve it before he sent it to the Washington Post?
I can't remember, but I doubt it.
Did you have a policy with respect to whether you reviewed communications posted by your underlings in your department to the press?
We did. That would have been not possible from the amount of emails that people were receiving to see them all beforehand.
No matter what the topic matter?
There may have been the odd occasion if someone wanted something gut checked or something like that, but I don't believe that happened in this situation.
All right, so just so I understand your testimony, are you saying it was perfectly appropriate and not something that was out of the ordinary for people under your staff to communicate with the press on matters like this without getting it approved by you?
Correct.
The on-background information that's on the second page of Mr. Arnold's email, did you have any part in verifying the accuracy of any of that information?
I can't remember the detail, but I believe Dave and other members on the team absolutely would have done.
All right, but that's speculation on your part, isn't it?
I can remember them saying that they had done that.
Okay, now, my question wasn't that at all. My question was, did you do anything to investigate the accuracy of this information under the header on background?
Sure. So I would have spoken to the security team. I would have spoken to the legal team.
Ms. O'Brien, may I stop you there?
Sure.
You use in a lot of your answers, I would have. And what I'm trying to get at is to find out what actually happened. And so if you know that you did something, would you tell me? And if you don't know whether you did it, would you also say that as well?
Sure.
So we understand your testimony
Okay.
better. All right. Did you contact anybody to verify the accuracy of this information?
On the new terms that we've come with here, I can't remember specifically.
Thank you. Will you mark this, please?
Thank you.
I've handed you more documents that have been produced by your counsel, in this case on behalf of Tesla. And the first email is an email from someone named Erica Chin at 12:38 a.m. on Thursday, June 21st, where she's telling you thanks for the head up, and it's in response to an email you had sent to various people at 9:29 p.m. that evening. Do you see that?
I do.
And do you recall the context of these email communications between you and Ms. Chen?
Take a moment to review it if you need to.
It was to make sure that Laura Hardy headed up communications in the London office. So it was to make sure that while it was obviously getting late here in California, so it was to make sure that the team were monitoring news coverage of additional stories that would run from this. And Erica Chan had the same role of coverage monitoring here in the US.
Was Ms. Chen someone in your communications department?
She was.
What about Melissa Roca?
She was.
And do you remember what their titles were?
Melissa was something along the lines of a communications executive, probably, and I actually think Erica had the same job title.
You say at the end of your email, you'll see the statement and talking points we have in here, but we're waiting till the morning to send those round in case we need to change anything. What did you mean by that?
I can't remember.
Will you mark this, please? I think it's 7.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, I've handed you another email chain, and the top email is one from you to Sam Teller and Todd Moran, and you say at the top of it, if you can help me make him stop, that would be great. What are you referring to in that email?
I believe I'm asking Sam to stop Elon from, if he can help me stop Elon from emailing the journalist directly.
And why did you want that to happen?
Because we were already talking to the journalist at the same time. So it wasn't clear. The lines of communication weren't clear.
Did you have a concern that Mr. Musk wasn't careful in his pronouncements to the press?
Not that he wasn't careful, but it's just difficult when you're doing communications to try and sort of manage news cycles or manage kind of communication situations when you're talking to a journalist and the CEO is doing it at the same time.
Is it your testimony that you believed Mr. Musk was careful about his communications to the press?
I think you'd have to ask him that.
I'm sorry?
You'd have to ask him that.
No, my question was directed to your observation. Did you believe Mr. Musk was careful in all of his communications to the press?
Most of the time, because Elon is, some of these journalists he knows, some of them he has relationships. There would be times when he would contact them, and I obviously wouldn't like it for the reasons I've explained, which were primarily just because, again, it's really difficult to do your job when you're doing communications if the CEO is doing the same thing.
Are there similar emails from you to other people at Tesla expressing the same thought or comment regarding other subject matters?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Let me rephrase it so it's clear for you. This email that you say, if you can help me make him stop, that'd be great. Were there other matters that you sent out such requests?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
I can't remember.
Let's mark this, please. 8? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Ms. O'Brien, I've handed you what's been marked as Exhibit number 8. And this is actually an email dated Thursday, June 21, 2018 at 2:21 p.m. And it's from you to Jeff Jones. And you copy Shamara Bell and someone named Angel Biznez. Is that correct?
That's the name here, yep.
All right. Can you tell me who Angel is?
I think Angel is the supervisor or the manager or someone like that in Shamara's organization.
And what is Shamara's organization?
In the call center.
Tell me what you understand about the call center that Shamara worked at. What was their role and function, if you know?
Really high level customer service when people would call. Yeah, high level customer service. The details I wouldn't know much more beyond that.
And who was her center's phone number released to? Do you know?
I don't.
Do you know where the phone number for the call center was published in 2018?
I don't.
Did you ever ascertain why the caller that called on June 20th called to that call center, which you described as a customer care center?
I don't know. As in why they would call that number, and yeah, I don't know.
Did you ever ask anybody?
No, because it wouldn't have been unusual.
Wouldn't have been unusual for what?
Because that's, if it's a call center that's going through, it's going to be a public number.
You forwarded in your email an email that Shamara Bell had sent to Jeff Jones and this Angel business, and I hope I'm not butchering that. And she described the phone call. Do you see that?
I do.
In her email description, at least in this one, she doesn't use the term shoot the place up or even shoot people, does she?
She does not.
When you read this, did you feel any concern that the press release of the previous day had overstated what she said?
I can't remember exactly, but I don't believe I did, because it was still the same framing. You know, he was very upset, heavily armed, those elements.
But someone had to take whatever statement she said and extrapolate from that to surmise that he was going to shoot people or shoot the place up, right?
Yes.
But you don't know who did that.
No. Well, I would believe it. I believed it was the security team.
Do you have any knowledge upon what they based that extrapolation from her reported statement?
I believe they spoke to her.
And when you say "I believe," what is that based upon?
My recollection of the conversation I would have had with security at the time.
So you recall specifically that they told you they spoke with
That's
her?
that's what was said on that phone conversation.
Okay, and when did they tell you that?
Shortly after I called them, which would have been in between that 5:29 and 5:55 time frame.
On June 20th.
On June 20th.
Thank you. Would you mark this, please?
Thank you.
You've just been handed what's been marked as Exhibit 9. And this appears to be an email from you dated June 21, 2018 at 10:09 p.m. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you know why the email doesn't have a "to" on the email?
I guess because this is in my would have been in my drafts folder, which is not unusual for me.
Explain that to me, if you will.
So I would often I would draft emails in that form, or I would take my notes in drafts, as I mentioned earlier. Sometimes I would have things ready. I would have typed something out on my laptop. So if I've gone home, which is probably why I did this, because it would have got late and took me an hour to get, maybe 2 hours to get from the factory to my home. If I needed to send something, I could then send that on my phone if I had it saved in drafts.
I see. So this is essentially, because it doesn't have a "to," that suggests to you this was a note to yourself that you ultimately never sent.
Correct.
So even though you address it, "Hi Elon," you believe this email wasn't sent?
I don't think so, because there's no to sign.
Do you believe you conveyed this information to Mr. Musk?
Most likely, yes.
In other words, do you think you made these notes for yourself and didn't send it as an email with the intention that you would speak with him orally and communicate this information?
I can't remember.
Would you mark that?
This is 10.
This is a series of emails on June 21, 2018, of which one of them was authored by you, the one at 2:41 p.m. Do you see that on the first
I do.
page?
Yeah.
And you say, "I'm trying to speak to Shamira to see if she'd be open to speaking to media." Why were you doing that?
Because at the time, people did not, some media did not believe that a phone call had taken place.
There was a statement above by Gina Antonini that says, "Yuck, I can't believe you would give Laura anything," Dave. Do you know what she was referring to there?
Yeah, Laura Kolodny is a journalist at CNBC who would be very difficult to deal with. So I would assume that Laura was also asking Dave the same about this story in general. Ryan Felton is another journalist.
Okay. Thank you.
This will be 11.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, we're moving forward in time. This is Saturday, June 23, 2018 at 11:03 a.m. This is certainly a Saturday where you were working, correct?
Correct.
As of Saturday, June 23, 2018, you're communicating to various people on your team. We're no longer doing a blog post, just sending out all the facts together in one email to key reporters per Elon, correct?
Correct.
And there's one new name that appears in the two line, that's Alexandra Vlasic.
Yes,
Is that someone who worked for you
that is.
in communications?
That's correct. As is Keely Sorpriso and Catherine Chan.
All right. And in fact, all the people to whom this is either directed or copied are in your department.
Correct.
And where it says we're no longer doing a blog post, what did that mean?
Just sort of going back through here, it looks like we had drafted a blog post, which we would sometimes do if media weren't articulating the story or reporting on it accurately. So I think we had a blog post drafted, which I've said here that Elon has not reviewed and approved. We would sometimes do that just in case we felt like we needed it.
Was a blog post ever published?
No.
Where was that blog post draft kept?
I don't remember.
Did you prepare it?
I don't remember.
Do you believe you prepared it?
It would either have been myself or Dave or potentially Gina, someone else in the comms team.
Was that blog post kept somewhere?
I mean, we probably had email drafts of it in our emails.
Okay. And can you describe generally to me what the blog post contained?
Just seeing it here, it's here in, this is it here in the second page.
All right, thank you. There's an email below yours from Alan Cooper on June 23, 2018 at 9:59 a.m. Where there's a quote that says, "He's a thief and either a liar." Do you see that?
I do.
Is that something Mr. Cooper drafted in the quote?
I think that's something, I don't think so. I think he's pulling that from the draft blog post.
And then there's a statement below that says, quote, "is very well heavily armed," into quote, "reads like a typo." Did you have an understanding what that related to?
I didn't, or I can't remember.
Why was the decision made not to put up the blog after so much effort was spent in creating this?
So that it's not unusual. We'd often spend time drafting blog posts that would never be published. I'm assuming it's because the media cycle didn't need it, and we don't, like it had already, media weren't interested in the story anymore.
If we look at the next to last page, which has a Bates numbering, that's numbering on the lower right-hand corner, this says 9711 in the lower right-hand corner. There's a description that says, after Tripp emailed Elon Wednesday morning, our customer service call center received a call. And then it goes on to describe in some quotes the call that Miss Bill took. Do you see that?
I do.
And you would agree with me, nowhere in this quote is the reference made to shooting people or shoot the place up?
Not those words, but obviously it says very well, heavily armed.
Was it ever suggested to you that a good way to undermine Mr. Tripp's credibility about the things he was going to the press about regarding Tesla would be to suggest he was going to shoot people up at the Gigafactory?
No.
Let's mark this as the next one.
This is 12.
Can you see if I gave you 2, please? No, I didn't. Here it is. Thank you, Elsa. This is an email that you sent on July 11th, 2018 at 11:32 p.m. to Minji Go. Do you see that?
Yes.
Who is Minji Go?
She is the woman that manages blog posts and works on the marketing team to help them go live.
Now, this is, what, a couple weeks or so after the incident? There's still work being done on this blog post concerning Mr. Tripp?
You can read the document
Sorry,
if you
thanks.
need it for context.
Yes. Sorry.
So 2 weeks after you suggested to Mr. Cooper that we're not doing a blog post, it appears that discussions are still going on about the contents of what might be included in a blog post. Is that correct?
That's correct. I just can't see in here that this is a specific blog post to Martin Tripp. Unless I've missed that.
Do you have any independent recollection that there were discussions concerning a blog post related to Martin Tripp after your June 23rd, 2018 email Exhibit 11 that we've been talking about?
I don't remember.
Let's look at the next to last page, which is numbered 16838. And on the bottom, Mr. Arnold sent an email to Miss Go and copied you on July 11th, 2018 at 4:58 p.m. And then she says, hey, Kimberly, we may have a blog post for you coming as soon as this evening. And then if we look on the next page below his signature line, there's a reference to an enclosure that says Tripp email. Do you see that?
I do, yeah.
Does that refresh your recollection that here 2 weeks later, there's still discussion about putting up a blog post?
Doesn't.
And as you
No.
sit here today, you can't recall anything about those discussions?
I can't. Sorry.
This is 13.
Thank you. I've handed you exhibit number 13, which is a document that was produced to us by your counsel on behalf of Tesla. And it doesn't appear any of this is copied to you, but it suggests that in August there was still discussion concerning a blog post. If you look at this document, does it refresh your recollection as to any discussions you may have been a part of concerning a blog post? In August of 2018?
It doesn't, just because we would have quite a few. This would happen a bit where you'd have sort of draft blog posts ready to go, but they wouldn't publish.
All right. And now these emails in August are not copied to you. Did there come a time when this whole Martin Tripp matter was shifted over to Dave Arnold instead of you?
By this point, I had handed in my notice. I handed in my notice probably about a month before this.
So when do you think you handed your notice? Early July?
Mid-July.
Mid-July?
Mid-July.
Do you have a sense of, if we looked at a calendar, would it help you?
And my husband's birthday is the 17th, and I think it was two or 3 days before that, a couple of days before.
Thank you.
And at this time, we were dealing with the SEC, so Dave probably was more involved in this.
I see. You told me earlier in response to a question I asked that on the evening of July 20th, you believe you would have talked to Elon Musk about this matter, but you couldn't recall specifics of it. Is that a fair summary?
Specifics of a conversation, if we did have it, yeah.
Okay.
Like, I would be surprised if we didn't. Sorry, and you're talking about the 20th.
Right now, I'm just focusing on that window because that's what I asked you about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be surprised if I did not talk to him at some point in that time period for this.
Now, did you have other conversations with Mr. Musk regarding Martin Tripp?
Yes.
And when did those discussions take place?
I will caution you not to reveal discussions that involved counsel.
Yeah.
But with that caveat, you can answer.
Yeah. It would have been initially when we first received the email from Lynette Lopez with the information that she had for the story, the very, very first Marty Tripp story.
Right, and that was several weeks before the June 20th incident.
I believe so, yeah.
And so you had you had several conversations between when that story came out and the June 20th reported incident?
I would have absolutely told Elon about the story, what I thought it was going to say, the work that we were doing. So yeah, we would have spoken about it in that time frame.
I'm sorry, did you finish? I apologize.
Sorry, we would have spoken about it in that time frame.
Okay, let me make sure I understand that answer. You absolutely would have spoken to Mr. Musk in that time frame. I assume by time frame you mean between the article and between June 20th?
As soon as I found out about the article.
Okay. Do you know how many conversations you had with Mr. Musk concerning Mr. Tripp?
I don't.
Can you tell us, other than a conversation where a lawyer was on the phone or in the room, can you tell us about those conversations?
Honestly, most of them would have been with a lawyer.
Okay. And how many of those conversations took place?
More than 10.
Were some of them in person?
Some of them would have been, because at this point I was in the factory with Elon quite regularly.
And some of them were by conference call?
It would be either on email, maybe on the phone, or in person.
All right, I want to just be clear for the record. I'm not referring to an email communication. So how many phone calls and or meetings did you have with him between the article and June 20th?
About Mr. Tripp?
About Mr. Tripp,
Yeah.
thank you.
Around 10. but that is a guess.
Okay, and some of them were by phone and some of them were in person?
Yes.
Now, again, we know what your testimony was regarding the evening of June 20th. Do you recall having any additional conversations with Mr. Musk from that point forward regarding Marty Tripp?
Yes, like we would have talked about it because it was a story. It was a substantial story at the time.
Do you think you spoke with him one or more occasions on June 21st, the day after the incident?
I can't remember.
What about in succeeding days?
Yeah, I would have done to keep him updated on what we were doing and what the story was doing.
Okay. And again, if there were lawyers involved, I can't ask and don't want to ask.
Yeah.
But were there any communications where you discussed Martin Tripp or the incident, the alleged incident at the Gigafactory, where lawyers weren't involved?
I can't remember.
Fair enough. Let's mark this, please.
This will be 14.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, this is a one-page email that's been marked Exhibit 14, which is from you dated July 31st, 2018, and there's note 2, so should we also infer this is a note you made?
Yes.
And did not send?
Did not send.
The other note we looked at that was similar to this, it also appeared to be addressed to Elon, although you indicated was not sent. Does that suggest to you, you prepared this note so you would have your thoughts in notes organized so that when you spoke to him, you would relay this information to him?
Yes.
And so, in the case of this email, do you believe that you likely subsequently spoke with him and provided this information to him?
It's more likely that I wouldn't sort of type something out to then say it to Elon. It's more likely that I was drafting an email to send it to him and the email was never sent.
And was it never sent because you subsequently talked to him? Or is there some other reason it was never sent?
I can't remember, but because there's kind of coverage links at the bottom, it's normally something that I would have sent on an email rather than try and explain it on the phone.
This will be 15.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, you've been handed Exhibit 15. Much of Exhibit 15 you've already seen in another email, but I want to direct your attention to your email at the top, where you're basically forwarding Mr. Arnold's email of 6:01 p.m. To the Washington Post. And in your email to Catherine Chan, Dave Arnold, and Gina Antonini, you say Elon is okay to not have us blast an email with all the information. He's also okay for us not to have a blog post or to correct the stories on this, period, end of quote. First of all, does that refresh your recollection that you actually spoke with him that day concerning this matter?
I would have done, yeah.
And will you say, for us, he's okay for us not to have a blog post to correct the stories on this? What were you referring to?
So when stories were often inaccurate, which a lot of them were in this situation, we would sometimes publish a blog post to kind of very clearly outline, all the information that we had. So I'm assuming we would have had a blog post drafted, or were planning to draft a blog post, because it's often easier to do that rather than contact each journalist one by one when the news cycle is so big. So this feels like he's saying that not to do a blog post, but we should continue to do what we were doing, which was calling journalists one by one, giving them this information below.
And so when he indicated to you and you communicated to other people on your team that he was okay for us not to have a blog post to correct the stories on this, did you understand that he was saying that now that Tesla had learned that the sheriff's department ascertained that there was no credibility to the purported threat, that he's saying we don't have to correct the prior information we had disseminated to the public?
Objection, mischaracterizes the document. It calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
You can answer. I'm trying to understand what your intent was, what you were communicating in that message.
Can you ask the question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did your reference to him saying that it was okay not to correct the stories, did that have anything to do with the Gigafactory threat?
Just reading this again for the first time since obviously sending this, I'm sort of reading it differently, I think, to saying Elon is okay for us not to have the blog post and that we continue to correct the stories the way that we were. Because I think by this point, the sheriff's department had already issued a statement, if I had that right.
Well,
So the news cycle had sort of shifted.
you're saying here, he said it's okay for us not to have a blog post to correct the stories on this. So are you saying that that had nothing to do with the Gigafactory shooting?
Oh, do you mean the blog post itself having something to do with the Gigafactory shooting?
No. His statement that we don't have to correct the stories, did that have anything to do with the alleged threat or not, if you know?
I don't know.
Now, how, in your communications experience, which is quite extensive, how many incidents have you been involved in where there was a report of a threatened shooting incident within the place or the company that you worked?
Twice before.
And were you involved in those instances in reporting those?
In reporting them.
In any fashion, let's say to the media?
Oh, in working with media on what the story. Yes.
Okay, and where did those alleged or threatened shooting events?
Both when I was at Apple.
I'm sorry, we again have to let each other
Sorry.
finish. So let me just ask the question again. Where did those shooting threats occur?
They weren't threats. They were one was a real shooting when I was at Apple.
And what was the other one?
I think that was a threat again when I was at Apple, but in the London office working on the iTunes Festival.
So that's happened a total of 3 times in your work career.
Yeah.
Okay. I assume every one of them were very vivid in your recollection?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were. One of them was I wasn't as involved, I would say. You know, like when I was at Apple, there would have been. I mean, the one there where someone actually died. There were sort of 30, 40, even more than that, communications people working on that.
All right, so one of the incidents at Apple you were less involved than you were in the Tripp incident and the other Apple incident.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of the nature of the occurrence, would it be fair to assume your adrenaline is raised such that you probably remember these occurrences more than you'd recall, like a press report regarding production numbers or something else?
To be honest, at this time, there were many things. I was in a different position in the company. You know, at Apple, I was more junior. B, I was reporting directly into the CEO, which was very different from what I was doing when I was at Apple. But also, there were many stories. There was lots happening at the time. You know, like
At Tesla?
At Tesla, yeah.
In the summer of 2018?
Yes.
Anything as dramatic as a possible shooting?
Elon had made the comments about the Thai rescue diver for the the diving situation in Thailand, being a paedophile. We then also had the SEC situation. We were trying to get Model 3 out, just trying to produce the car. So there were a number of things.
And now that you mentioned those other two incidents, does that refresh your recollection that you might have thought Mr. Musk was somewhat reckless in his communications to the public on behalf of Tesla?
On the cars, on getting Model 3 out the door, everyone was, I don't know if I'd describe any of it as reckless, to be honest. On the SEC one, again, I don't know if I just thought that was not accurate. On the
His statement was not accurate?
No, as in he believed it was accurate, from what I understand, but you'd need to ask him that.
Okay, but when you're saying, you pointed out accuracy, what is it you're saying? I'm interested in your testimony.
As in what I believe from Elon's accuracy?
Right. Well, where were you going with that when you said there was some issue about the accuracy of his statement?
Objection mischaracterizes prior testimony. You can still answer.
It's more that I'm trying to explain that there were lots of things happening at that time in the factory.
All right.
And in Tesla in general.
All right. And one of those was when Mr. Musk accused someone in the news of being a pedophile, right?
It wasn't in the news. It was one of the divers.
That he accused of being a pedophile?
Yes.
And he did that publicly, right?
He did, yeah.
Okay. Did that trouble you as a communications
Yes, it did.
director?
Yeah.
And why?
Because you don't call someone that in public.
Okay. And certainly you would agree that that was an irresponsible comment.
Yeah.
This will be 16.
Thank you.
I've handed you an email that was sent to you at 9:22 p.m. on June 21st, 2018 from Elon Musk to you. And he says, please call my cell.
Yeah.
You had Elon Musk's cell number?
Yes.
And you had written to him earlier a few minutes to say, we'll follow up with Maya to make sure she has all our talking points. She's a journal we've been having trouble with recently. Let's break that apart. Who is Maya?
She's a reporter she was a reporter for the Hive section of Vanity Fair.
And you say, we'll follow up with Mayo to make sure she has all our talking points. What were you referring to by talking points?
I guess I'm talking about the background points.
Do you recall your phone conversation on Mr. Musk's cell on Thursday, June 21, late at night?
I don't.
Do you recall anything about the phone call?
I don't.
This is 17.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, here's another email marked Exhibit 17. That is your email. The first email is dated Thursday, June 21, 2018 at 9:54 p.m. So it would have been relatively late the evening, the day after the alleged phone call. And you say to two members on your team, Elon's annoyed that our talking points aren't, it appears to be an incomplete sentence. What were you communicating?
I can't remember. But I'd assume that it's something along the lines of that they're not, our talking points aren't cutting through.
In what talking points was the subject of this concern?
The background points.
And specifically what background points?
The ones in Exhibit 1.
Okay, and so none of the background points were coming out in the press, and that's a concern to you?
Yes, it would have been.
And it was a concern to Elon as well?
From looking at this, it seems like yes.
And yet, in another email dated June 21st at 9:36 p.m., you wrote, yeah, he wants us to go much harder with pushing our points. He wants us to email all media that covered Tesla the talking points we drafted last night. Are you referring to Mr. Musk there again?
Yes.
Now, these various detailed emails we've been looking at that you've authored concerning your communications with Musk, do they refresh your recollection as to any of these communications you had with Mr. Musk?
The email and just sort of knowing how we worked does, but I can't remember the specifics of that conversation. So just to kind of give you more context, the talking points that we had here, so like the background points, the trouble that we were having, because they're on background, media just, unless you put all of this stuff on the record, media are going to selectively use what they want, which is why we were sort of saying, do we put this into a blog so we have some sort of public record where people are going to use everything?
Let's look at the email that begins at the bottom of the first page from Drew Harwell at the Washington Post on June 21, 2018 at 10:51 a.m. And it's sent to Mr. Arnold, Gina, and copied to yourself with the heading "Hi from Washington Post." And Mr. Harwell at the Washington Post says, "Hi all, any thoughts on the latest from the sheriff's office? We're also getting questions about who originally reported the potential threat. Can you share anything about that person?" Tripp told Ars Technica that he absolutely believed that Elon Musk himself made up the allegation. Any comment? Thanks again. When you received that on the morning following the alleged incident, does that refresh your recollection how quickly you learned that the sheriff's office had dismissed the alleged threat?
Objection mischaracterizes the document.
So what I can recall vaguely, again, sorry, from this period of time was that I don't know if the sheriff's office had actually confirmed anything by that point, or if they'd actually even responded to media. So media were contacting the sheriff's office to get confirmation that they were investigating, and the sheriff's office weren't responding to calls. So I think that's what that's referring to here.
All right, so whatever the sheriff was doing at 10:51 a.m. on the morning of June 21st, someone at the Post is asking someone under your supervision, any thoughts on the latest from the sheriff's office? Do you know what he was referring to from the sheriff's office?
don't.
Did you know at that time?
I don't.
Does that refresh your recollection whether you had any understanding of what the sheriff's position was with respect to the alleged threat as of 10:51 a.m. on June 21st?
I don't remember.
Did you do anything in response to this email to find out what the status was at the sheriff's office as of that point in time and date?
I don't remember.
This will be 18.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien, the exhibit I've just handed you, Exhibit 18, is an email from you to Dave Arnold and copied to Gina Antonini, dated Thursday, June 21, 2018 at 5:19 p.m. And you say to Dave, yeah, I think we just asked people to remove her name and give the context that she's a customer specialist, that the call went through to our customer. First of all, who are you referring to there?
Shamara.
Okay. And why did you want to remove her name in any reporting to the press?
Because I just was trying to protect her.
Okay. You were trying to protect her from media scrutiny, for
Just
harassment?
From harassment, yeah.
All right. And were the same considerations made with respect to the Tesla statement about Mr. Tripp? In other words, withholding the name of the person supposedly involved in the alleged threat until it had been properly vetted and investigated.
Objection assumes facts not in evidence and argumentative.
I think by that point, I can't remember having that feeling.
Okay. Was one of the reasons why you didn't have that feeling was that Mr. Musk had already done that?
I can't remember, but also just the story by that point had been weeks old.
Well, no, not the story regarding the threat to shoot up the Gigafactory, right?
But correct. But the overall story of Marty Tripp and the allegations that had been made up until that point.
What about the story up to that point regarding his revelations to the press changed anything about the alleged incident to come in and shoot up the place and made that therefore information that should be freely released?
I don't.
Objection, vague and ambiguous compound.
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, would you read it back?
What about the story up to that point regarding his revelations to the press changed anything about the alleged incident to come in and shoot up the place and made that information that is to be freely released?
Same objections.
I don't believe it would have done, but it's more the case of media knew by that point who Marty Tripp was, and yeah, like there was no point where it felt like we shouldn't have given the information that we'd received from the security team at the time, which was exactly what was in the statement.
But nobody knew that Mr. Tripp was the person referenced in that phone call until Mr. Musk himself took it upon himself to release Martin Tripp's name. Isn't that a fact?
That's correct.
What do we time for our...
Anytime
break?
you would like.
If now's a good time, let's do it.
Fine.
We are going off the record at approximately 7:56 p.m. We are back on the record at approximately 8:07 p.m.
Would you mark this, please?
This will be 19.
Mr. O'Brien, I've handed you what's been marked as exhibit number 19. I'm really only interested in what's on the first page. There's an email from Ms. Wong to you on June 21, 2018 at 9:24 a.m. So this is the morning following your press release on behalf of Tesla to the press. And Ms. Wong says, "Hi, Sarah. Checking in again to see if you can provide any more details on this phone call from a friend of Tripp about a shooting threat at the Gigafactory. The Sheriff's Department has determined that there was, quote, no credible threat, end of quote. Does Tesla know who made the call?" End of the question mark. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall this email?
I don't, but it was sent because my name is there.
Does this help refresh your recollection that when I was talking to you about an email that was after this time on June 21st, that by this point someone had told you that the Sheriff's Department had determined there was, quote, no credible threat, end of quote?
They must have done.
Does this email refresh your recollection as to anything you might have done when presented this information to attempt to verify what the nature of the sheriff's conclusions were?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
By this point, I would have just been getting information from the security team, but I can't remember the details.
All right, again, I don't want you to guess or assume or speculate what might have been. I want to try to ascertain what the facts were, and if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know. Let me ask you it this way. Once you got this information, did you reach out to the security team?
I don't know.
Once you got this information, did you reach out to the Sheriff's Department?
I can't remember.
Once you received this information, did you ask anybody at Tesla to do any follow-up?
I can't remember.
Once you got this information, did you suggest to anyone at Tesla that they should do any corrective action with respect to the press release you had put out the night before?
Objection vague and ambiguous.
I can't remember.
Let me address her objection. When you got this this communication, did you do any corrective action with respect to the press release you put out the night before?
I can't remember.
This will be 20.
I've just handed you an email that's been, or a series of emails that have been marked as exhibit number 20. And do you recognize the first email is an email from you to Ms. Wong at The Guardian, dated June 21, 2018 at 10:15 a.m.
Yes.
And you say in your email, "Hi Julia, we've sent all the information we can share with you." And then you go on to say, "As you've seen from the statement from the sheriff, the names of all involved parties are being withheld pending the completion of the investigation." End of quote. Why did you say that last statement?
There was an element at the time, Julia wasn't the only journalist who was questioning whether or not a call even happened. And from the sheriff's statement that they shared saying no credible threat, some media at the time took that to mean that a call wasn't made at all. So I think I would have said this to sort of be clear that there, you know, that there is and there was and there is an investigation.
Can you tell me why this same thought process didn't apply to Marty Tripp by Tesla? In other words, why either you, Mr. Musk, or anyone else at Tripp didn't assume that Mr. Tripp deserved the same respect for his privacy until the investigation had been completed?
Objection compound, vague and ambiguous, argumentative.
I don't know.
Would you mark this, please?
This is 21.
My question is more general on this document. After you've looked at it, would you help me understand what this is?
Oh, IFTTT. I can't remember the name, what the name of the actual service, but it's something that you can sign up to, so you get alerts not only when someone tweets something, but when there is a response to a tweet. So this would have been an alert. This is an alert I would have got from IFTTT.
So when did you set up this? Well, this is kind of like a Google alert,
It
right?
is, exactly.
And so, but it relates to Twitter.
It does.
And so when did you set up this alert to notify you that Mr. Musk had done a tweet?
Probably when I joined the company.
And why did you do this?
Because just to make sure I didn't miss tweets or responses to tweets.
And did you set up such an alert for other officials at Tesla?
Yes, I can remember I used to get them for John McNeil, who was the head of sales. There were a few other people that would tweet occasionally, but John McNeil I can remember doing that for.
Did Mr. Musk run this Twitter remark he made on July 5th by you before sending it out?
No.
And he says apparently in his Twitter, because it's in the subject, it says, "Why won't Lopez go on record saying she never offered Tripp anything for inside info?" Do you see that?
I do.
Did you ever run across any evidence that this reporter, Miss Lopez, offered any remuneration to Mr. Tripp for any information?
I don't remember.
Have you ever heard of Miss Lopez doing that?
I have not.
In your experience, is this common for a reporter to pay someone for information like this?
Objection lacks foundation, calls for speculation.
It's uncommon, but I have heard of it happening.
Have you experienced it happening?
I have not. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Certainly not at Tesla.
Not that I'm aware of.
Is this another comment by Mr. Musk that you would view as having been reckless?
Objection argumentative.
I wouldn't describe it as reckless.
What factual basis, if any, are you aware of to support such a statement?
To say
Objection mischaracterizes the document itself.
as to why I would not describe it as reckless.
No. What information, if any, are you aware of that would support the concept that this reporter, Miss Lopez, paid anything to Mr. Tripp?
Objection mischaracterizes the document.
I can't remember that element of it.
So you're aware of no evidence?
Yeah,
That's-
from memory, correct.
Okay. And that's something you'd probably remember if you'd ever came across evidence, right?
Yes, although I can remember, but it's a vague memory, which is why which is why I don't want to be crystal clear on it. I can remember something, again, I'm going to reiterate that it was vague, that there was someone else as part of the investigation, another person, that came forward at some point with information on the case that said that there was some comment about payment, but I can't remember the details of that.
You can't remember anything more?
No,
Do you know who that person was?
no,
Do you know when they came forward?
I can't remember.
Do you know who it was a payment from or to?
I can't remember. That's why it's vague.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's my highlighted. Oh, no, they're all highlighted.
This is 22.
Thank you. Ms. O'Brien, this is an email document from you dated Saturday, June 23, 2018 at 11:24, marked as Exhibit 22. It doesn't have a to, so is this another situation where you believe this was a note you made to yourself that never was sent?
It is.
Now this one, unlike the other two that we've looked at before, is not addressed to Elon. Do you see that?
I do.
What is the significance of that?
This was probably not something that I was sending to him. Yeah.
Now, there's one item in the second bullet point where you're talking about hacking, and you ask in the highlighted section, Nick, any documentary evidence to provide for this? Why were you asking Nick if he had any evidence of that at that time?
This is in June. I can't remember.
At the bottom of your email, under the heading threatening phone call, here's another incident where you describe Shamara Bell's description of the event. Do you see that?
I do, right at the bottom. Yep.
And you would agree with me that in this description, there's no reference to shooting people or shoot the place up, correct?
Correct, but it still has heavily armed. But yeah, there's no word shoot in there.
You make a point at the top of the last page of this email. The caller said that he didn't want to share his name because he didn't want to create problems for himself, but that he didn't want anyone to get hurt. And then you put some parts of that in quotes. Are those an exact quote of something that Miss Bell wrote?
I can't remember.
Did the fact that you noted and apparently acknowledged that this caller said he didn't want to share his name. Did that undermine in any way the credibility of the caller to you?
I don't think so.
Let me ask you this. If you had become personally aware of someone who you thought was going to seriously harm somebody else, would you in any way refuse to give your name when reporting such a serious incident?
Objection, incomplete, hypothetical.
If I was contacting the police, I mean, I personally would, but if I was, to me, if you're an employee of the company or you're a friend of someone, if they don't want to get their friend in trouble to an extent, or they don't want to be named to their friend because they don't want to upset a relationship, there was part to that sort of makes sense to me. But yeah, if it was me personally, if there was a threat like that, I would give my name.
Well, I want to make sure I understand that answer. So are you saying that you could understand why someone wouldn't want to upset their relationship with someone who was going to shoot people?
If it's, I mean, to me at the time, I think, and just sort of seeing that, yeah, like if it's a friend or, for example, like if it's a friend of someone that they are just sort of giving a tip, there's lots of tips that happen all the time that are anonymous.
So could you perceive of any situation where you were aware and sincerely believed that someone was going to, with a weapon, hurt somebody else, that you wouldn't divulge your name to anybody who might be able to prevent that?
Objection, incomplete, hypothetical.
It's complete as I intended it.
I just think that happens a lot. You know, where there's bomb threats.
That's not my question. You can speculate about what other people might say. That's not my question. My question was asking you, can you conceive of any similar situation where you wouldn't have divulged your name to anybody who might have been able to prevent such a horrible incident?
Objection, argumentative, asked and answered, incomplete, hypothetical.
You can really enter an objection without being dramatic for the purpose of the witness. I just have a real problem with these objections that are directed at the witness, and the witness constantly turns to you and listens and tries to parse out these speaking objections. It's improper, and you know so. All right, back to my question. Will you answer my question?
Can you ask it again, please?
Absolutely. Can you conceive of any situation where you would not reveal your name to someone who you are trying to prevent? Let me strike that. If you were in a situation as this alleged caller, can you imagine any situation where you wouldn't have divulged your name willingly to anybody who might have been able to prevent the shooting incident from taking place?
Incomplete, hypothetical, vague and ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine myself doing that. But just to be clear, it doesn't surprise me that people do.
All right, let's stay focused on you. Wouldn't have thought that would cross your mind if you were this alleged person trying to report a purported threat. Wouldn't have thought occurred to you that I'm going to tell my name because I want these people to take me seriously. I'm calling from a block call. I'm not revealing my identity. Maybe they think I'm a crank and they don't do anything about it. And if you were in that situation, wouldn't it occur to you, I definitely want to give them my name?
Objection, compound, vague and ambiguous, incomplete, hypothetical.
If you're talking about me specifically,
Yes, ma'am.
I probably would, depending on what the situation is.
Okay, can you envision any situation where you wouldn't personally?
If it was a situation where I thought my family or friends' lives were at risk by me divulging a name of someone that is threatening to shoot someone else.
Even if you believe this person was going to go into the factory and shoot up multiple people, and you would, for some reason, perhaps withhold your name?
Objection, asked and answered several times, argumentative, incomplete, hypothetical.
Did you catch all that? Okay. Would you answer the question, please?
I would just say exactly what I've said already, that if it was something that was, if I'd have called in a threat, and again, all of this is hypothetical, if I'd have called in a threat, but it was in a situation where I thought I didn't need to give my name because I'd already actually done the work of calling in a threat, and I'd given information that I thought would have been useful for someone. If there was a reason, for example, with relating to the safety of my family or friends, I may not give my name.
Okay. And having gone through that discussion that you and I have just done, doesn't it make you think, though, that putting yourself in the shoes of someone who's trying to evaluate such a call, that the fact that the person wouldn't reveal his identity undermines the credibility of the call?
Objection, compound, vague and ambiguous.
I think I just think I've heard of situations where threats are called in and they are anonymous threats. Some of those threats have become credible and some of them have not. So it's not something that I would sort of really put a heavy weight on as.
Do you make a distinction in your mind between acting on such an anonymous threat to try to protect people versus releasing such information to the press?
I don't know what you mean by that, sorry.
Okay. Well, do you make any distinction in your mind about what is an appropriate response, about how to use that information with respect to taking protective measures at the plant versus reporting such information to the media and press?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Yeah, sorry. Can you
Do you see any distinction at all between how to handle such information in terms of whether, if it's an anonymous call from a block number with a lack of details, could you see how someone might think, well, we ought to take protective action at the plant, but we might not want to release that to the press until we know more?
Objection, incomplete, hypothetical, vague and ambiguous.
I think that's. I think that's fair.
Now, you knew Tesla's official statement to the press that you had helped author was going to get a lot of attention from the press, correct?
Correct.
And so, in view of that knowledge, why did you not fact-check all aspects of that statement before disseminating it publicly?
Objection, mischaracterizes prior testimony.
I spoke to the security team, who were the experts in my mind and the kind of subject matter experts in it.
I think our food's about to arrive. You want to take a break
That
and
would
get
be
it?
just fine if you'd like to do that.
Okay, let's do that.
We are going off the record at approximately 8:29 p.m. We are back on the record at approximately 8:54 p.m.
All right. Do you have 19 in front of you?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. When you got this email from Julia Wong on June 21, 2018 at 9:24 a.m., where she's indicating that the Sheriff's Department has determined that there was no credible threat, were you concerned about the Sheriff's conclusion?
I think I can remember being concerned that they were saying no credible threat without necessarily confirming that a call had taken place.
Were you concerned about what this may mean for Tesla in the fact that this information had been put out by Mr. Musk 2 days later, and now the Sheriff's Department is saying there's nothing to this?
Objection mischaracterizes the document, the sheriff's statement, and calls for speculation.
All right, let me tighten up the question before you answer. Let me just be very clean. When you got this email, were you concerned about the statement in the email vis-a-vis the statement that Mr. Musk had put out to the press a day earlier?
Vague and ambiguous.
So I can remember being concerned about the fact that the Sheriff's Department weren't, and it seems like I can't remember, because I can remember them issuing a statement at some point which sort of clarified what the situation was, because there was a period of time when the Sheriff's Department weren't responding to calls to media to say that a call had even taken place. So it was, I think I, from memory, can remember thinking they needed to issue like a broader statement that explained there was no credible threat, but that a call was made. Because that was the part I was more concerned about, because people didn't believe us when we were saying that a call was actually made.
I probably should have told you this when we came back from our dinner break. You understand you're still under oath, right?
Yes.
And you're sworn to tell the truth.
Yep.
And again, was there something about the fact that the Sheriff's Department determined there was, quote, no credible threat that made you uncomfortable vis-a-vis Mr. Musk's statement that Mr. Musk was going to come in and shoot the place up?
Objection. I think you misspoke. I think you said Mr. Musk was going to come in and shoot the place up.
If I said that, then I did misspeak. Let me rephrase the question. I want to be very clear. When Julia said that the Sheriff's Department had determined there was, quote, no credible threat, did you have an adverse reaction vis-a-vis what Mr. Musk had said a day earlier?
Objection asked and answered, vague and ambiguous.
Yeah, my response would be the same, which is I can remember thinking in that context, if they're just saying no credible threat, media just did not believe that a call had happened. So I can remember being concerned in that when they were just saying it in the terms that are actually Julia's emailed here, that it wasn't, it didn't even imply that a call had actually happened. So I can remember being concerned that it was vague.
Were you also concerned about how it made Tesla look that Mr. Musk had published a statement that the Sheriff's Department had so quickly concluded was not a credible threat?
Mischaracterizes the statement.
Yeah, I don't think that was my concern. It was the fact that people just didn't believe us that a call had actually even taken place.
And you had no concern that, in view of this quick conclusion by the Sheriff's Department, that Mr. Musk's statement to the public was irresponsible?
No, because I think, and when you mean his statement, you mean the emails that he forwarded to Julia.
Yeah.
I think that he emailed what he believed the situation was. To me, the concern that I had with a lot of this was honestly that media just did not believe that a call had even happened. Julia was one of many journalists. I think Drew may have been another one. I think there was someone else who was saying the same thing. They were just like, we don't believe a call happened.
As a senior communications professional, do you believe it is enough for a CEO simply to believe a statement that he made? Or do you believe a CEO has to have a reasonable belief, a reasonable basis for a belief in a statement he made to the public?
A reasonable basis.
All right, let me have you take a look at the other exhibit, exhibit number 20. And this was, again, talking about the email between you and Julia Wong, and clearly in the middle of this email we see that at 9:41 a.m. Ms. Wong has communicated to you that they have questions in view of the fact that the Sheriff's Department has determined that there was no credible threat, and that's in the body of this. So my question to you is, as of 9:37 a.m., when you responded to Miss Julia Wong, did you stop putting out the official Tesla statement at this point in time?
I can't remember.
Is there any reason why you would have continued to put out the official Tesla statement after that information was disclosed to you by Ms. Wong?
The statement from the sheriff.
No, I'm referring to the Tesla statement. Is there any reason why you would have continued to put out the Tesla statement after you had learned about the sheriff's statement?
I don't know.
I have no further questions.
Why don't we take a quick break, see if I have a couple questions, and then...
All right.
We are going off the record at approximately 9:01 p.m. We are back on the record at approximately 9:17 p.m.
So, Ms. O'Brien, I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions to what you and Mr. Mitchell discussed. Do you recall earlier that he asked you about reasons why you might think, why you thought the call to the call center about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was a credible threat? Do you remember talking about that?
Yeah.
And was one of the reasons that you thought it might be a credible threat what was because of the context of what had been going on in the previous couple weeks before that threat?
Yes.
Objection leading.
What went into making you think that the call to the Gigafactory, or the call about the Gigafactory threat, was a credible threat?
Some of that would have been what was in the email that Elon had forwarded, where it felt like there was a threat in that email. Also beforehand, there had been a story with a leak, with leaked information that had appeared in Business Insider probably 2 weeks beforehand. There had been an investigation into that. The investigation had identified Martin Tripp as being the person that had leaked that information. And then there was a suit had been filed, which had also named Martin Tripp.
So let's talk about those. You mentioned that there was a Business Insider article, right?
Yeah.
And there was one of the Business Insider article had a source inside the Gigafactory, right?
Yes.
And was the fact that information inside the Gigafactory had been leaked to Lynette Lopez, did that factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call that came in about the threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection leading.
Yes, it did.
And how did it factor in?
Just because there felt like there was, it felt like it was a malicious leak.
And you also mentioned there was an investigation into the source of that leak, right?
Yes.
And did that factor into your analysis as to whether the call to about a potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection leading.
Yes.
And how did that factor in?
Because as part of that investigation, we knew, like, once the investigation had completed, we knew who it was that had leaked the information, and that was Martin Tripp. So the investigation had identified Marty.
Did you at any point learn that Mr. Tripp originally denied being the source of the leak to Business Insider?
Yeah, the security team had told me that.
And did the fact that Mr. Tripp originally denied being the leaker factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call with the threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection leading.
Yes,
How so?
because he'd lied.
And did you ever learn that Mr. Tripp eventually admitted that he in fact was the person who leaked information to Lynette Lopez?
Yes,
And how did you learn that?
through the security team.
And did the fact that Mr. Tripp admitted to being the source of the leak of information to Lynette Lopez factor into your analysis as to whether the call about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection, leading.
Yes,
How so?
Objection based upon the prior objection.
because it felt like it was, again, it just felt like it was malicious.
And did you come to learn that Mr. Tripp his employment was terminated by Tesla?
Yes,
And did that factor into your analysis of whether you thought that the call that had been made about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection, leading.
yes,
And how did that factor in?
because I thought he was upset with Tesla.
And did you learn that a lawsuit had been filed by Tesla against Mr. Tripp?
Yes,
And was it your understanding that Mr. Tripp was named publicly in that lawsuit?
yes,
And did the lawsuit factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call about the threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection, leading.
yes,
How so?
because people already knew who Marty Tripp was, media in particular.
And how did you learn that media at that point knew who Martin Tripp was?
Because they contacted us to say that. And I also think Marty had spoken to media about it.
And did the fact that, let's take those one at a time, did the fact that the media already know Martin Tripp's name factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call making the warning you of a potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Leading, objection.
Yes,
How so?
because it was known who he was.
And you mentioned that Mr. Tripp, you believe he was speaking to the press?
Yes,
And how did you learn that?
media told us.
And did the fact that Mr. Tripp was speaking to the press factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection, leading.
Yes,
How so?
Same objection.
because it was kind of like a run-up of events, really, and there was, media were aware of who he was contacting them.
And did you learn that at any point that Mr. Tripp, after he'd been terminated, was in contact with Mr. Musk?
Only from getting the email forwarded.
And are you talking about, I'm going to ask you to pull out Exhibit 7 out of your pile.
Yeah,
And do you see in the middle there's an email from Marty Tripp on June 20th, 2018 at 8:57 a.m. to Elon Musk, and the subject says termination lawsuit? It's on the very first page of Exhibit 7. Do you see that there's, in the very first page,
yes,
it says from Marty Tripp
yes,
to Elon Musk, and the date is June 20th, 2018 at 8:57 a.m. Do you
yeah,
see that?
Yep.
And the subject, what's the subject?
Termination lawsuit.
And what does Marty Tripp write to Elon Musk?
Don't worry, you have what's coming to you for the lies you have told to the public and investors.
And ultimately, this exchange between Mr. Tripp and Mr. Musk was forwarded to you, right?
Yeah,
And did the fact that Mr. Tripp had sent this email to, well, actually, let me strike that as a different question. What day was this email from Mr. Tripp sent to Elon Musk?
June the 20th,
And that's 2018?
2018.
And what was the date of the call that came in to warn about a potential threat to the Gigafactory?
June the 20th.
And which came first?
This email.
And when was the call? So the call about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was later the same day?
Later the same day.
And did the fact that Mr. Tripp had Mr. Musk the email that's in Exhibit 7 factor into your analysis as to whether you thought that the call about a potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Yes,
How so?
because it feels like it seems to me like that's a threat.
And when you say that's a threat, you mean the email from Mr. Tripp to Mr. Musk in
Correct.
Exhibit 7?
Yes.
Objection leading.
And you've talked earlier today about how you learned that there was a call that was made to the Las Vegas call center about a potential threat to the Gigafactory, right?
Yes.
And before issuing the PR statement that you put out and others on your team put out, did you talk to anyone to get more information about the call?
Yes.
And who did you speak to?
The security team.
And what did the security team tell you about the call?
Objection asked and answered.
Lots of the detail that is in the statement. They said that there had been a call had been made, that it was a friend, reportedly a friend of Marty Tripp's, who'd made the call. And the person said that Marty was distraught, heavily armed. Yeah.
And did the information that you got from security factor into your analysis as to whether you thought the call about the potential threat to the Gigafactory was credible?
Objection leading.
Yes.
How so?
Just because there was a security team that worked on the investigation beforehand, they'd been involved in the process up until this point, and yeah, I believed what they said.
And the analysis that we've just talked about, including about the leak, the investigation, all the way up to the you're speaking to security, was that analysis you did before issuing the PR statement?
Objection asked and answered. Leading.
Yes.
Now, if you could turn your attention, please, to... Actually, let me... do you remember earlier that Mr. Mitchell asked you about some questions about Mr. Tripp's privacy and why his name was in the statement that you issued about the Gigafactory threat? Do you remember
Yes.
that? And do you think it was appropriate to include Mr. Tripp's name in that PR statement?
Yes.
Why?
Because Mr. Tripp's name was already public, because of the information that we'd received from the security team, and because of the and because of just the information that we'd received up until that point, and he had also been speaking to media.
Was it your understanding before you issued the PR statement that Mr. Tripp had been speaking to members of the media?
Yes.
And was it your understanding before you issued the PR statement that the media already knew Mr. Tripp's name?
Yes.
I want to, if you can pull out of your pile, Exhibit 2, please. And I know you looked at Exhibit 2 earlier, and I believe Mr. Mitchell asked you some questions about it. And I believe one of the questions he talked about was whether you were unhappy about the communication that Mr. Musk had at the time you received it. Let me ask you a better question. Sorry about that. I believe earlier Mr. Mitchell asked you whether there was anything in Exhibit 2 that you were concerned about. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Objection misstates the question.
Yes.
And I believe you testified earlier that you had some concern about the substance of Mr. Musk's communication. Is that right?
Objection asked and answered. Misstates her testimony.
Yes.
Can you tell me which part you were concerned about in Exhibit 2 in the email chain?
The fact that Elon had forwarded an email between him and someone to a journalist.
And the someone in this case is Mr. Tripp.
Correct.
Your concern, is that Mr. your concern is then with respect to Mr. Musk's communication with Marty Tripp and forwarding that to Julia Wong? Is that right?
Objection, compound, leading, asked and answered.
Yes, and the fact that I didn't know about it before he did that.
No, let me direct, and when you say you didn't know he did that, what do you mean by that?
The first I knew that he had an email conversation with Marty Tripp was when I had the whole email conversation forwarded.
I want to direct your attention to the top of the email chain, which is from Mr. Musk to Julia Wong, with copied to you. Do you see that?
Yes.
And in it, Mr. Musk writes, Tripp sent me a threatening email this morning. Below is the exchange. I was just told that we received a call at the Gigafactory that he was going to come back and shoot people. The police have been alerted and we have posted additional security. Our comms team can fill you in. Do you see that?
Yes.
And did you have any concerns about the substance of that particular email in Exhibit 2?
No.
What concerns did you have, if any, about the email at the top of Exhibit 2?
None, aside from the immediate reaction, because it was the first I knew that this had happened, of the fact that threatening emails had been sent. Just the situation itself was...
And what do you mean when you say the situation itself?
As in the fact that threatening emails had been sent to Elon, which I didn't know about, that was concerning. The fact that we'd received a call from the Gigafactory that someone was going to come back and shoot people, like, that was concerning.
That's all the questions I have.
I have a few more. Ms. O'Brien, after I finished asking you my questions, you had a rather lengthy opportunity to visit with your counsel in the next room, and you have now come back and answered various questions posed by your counsel, Tesla's counsel, asking you if certain factors influenced your opinion with respect to the credibility of the alleged telephone threat. My question to you, Ms. O'Brien, is why couldn't you remember all these factors when I was asking you the questions before your lawyer suggested them to you?
Objection. I move to strike the preamble to the question. As to the question itself, it is, to the extent I will remind you not to divulge anything we discussed, and I will say that it mischaracterizes her testimony from earlier today.
And would you please answer the question?
Do you mind asking it again?
Please read it back verbatim.
Ms. O'Brien, you, after I finished asking you my questions, you had a rather lengthy opportunity to visit with your counsel in the next room, and you have now come back and answered various questions posed by your counsel, Tesla's counsel, asking you if certain factors influenced your opinion with respect to the credibility of the alleged telephone threat. My question to you, Ms. O'Brien, is why couldn't you remember all these factors when I was asking you the questions before your lawyer suggested them to you?
I don't feel that you're asking me the same questions.
You recall I asked you all the factors to explain all the factors that you believed made the threats appear credible to you, right?
Objection. Mischaracterizes prior testimony and questions.
I asked you a number of questions that bore on the issue of credibility, and
Yeah.
Isn't it true you didn't point out one of those things that your counsel suggested to you might have formed your opinion as to the credibility, did you?
Objection. Mischaracterizes facts and is argumentative.
Please answer.
I feel like I've answered everything to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my ability here.
All right, let's talk about some of these supposed issues. What about speaking to the media made Mr. Tripp appear to be someone who might come into the Gigafactory and shoot people?
It was the fact of the entire situation as a whole.
No, I want to stay very focused on my question. My question
I
is...
don't think she was done with her answer.
She wasn't answering my question.
She wasn't done with her answer. You got to let her finish.
I move to strike the answer and the question. Listen to my question carefully. My question is, what about speaking to the media suggests a person is likely to go into a factory and shoot people?
Now, Ms. O'Brien, were you done with your previous answer?
I was not.
Okay. Well, for the record, I believe you've interrupted her. Now, if you want to ask a new question, that's fine, but I'm not going to let you continue to interrupt her answers.
Listen to my question. My question is, let's take these items one by one that you had no problem answering Tesla's counsel, your purported counsel, in her questions. Let me see if I can ask you the questions and elicit the same degree of diligence in your response. My question is, what about going to the media makes a person more likely to shoot people?
Objection mischaracterizes prior testimony.
It's more the having someone named in a statement. People already knew who he was. He'd already contacted media. Media already knew who Martin Tripp was.
And that makes him more likely or more credible to be someone who would go in and shoot people?
Objection argumentative mischaracterizes prior testimony.
It was part of a, I mean, I know you're not going to be happy with me saying this, but it's part of a broader situation. You know, like multiple things had happened leading up to this point. All of those factors are things that would, you know, like all of us would have considered going into this.
Well, let's talk about a different one. Being fired. People get fired every day, don't they?
They do.
You don't have a blanket assumption that people that are fired are going to go into their former employer's office and shoot people, do you?
I don't, but he had been fired as part of an investigation into a leak that he had been made.
And to you, that was a basis for concluding he was likely, it was a credible threat that he called in, someone called in with knowledge that he was going to shoot up the Gigafactory?
It felt that it was more likely that he had a grudge.
Do you even know if Mr. Tripp owned a gun in June of 2018?
I believe the security team did tell me that at some point. I can't remember exactly what day they told me that.
Told you why?
That he had a gun license.
Okay, that wasn't my question. Did you have any knowledge as to whether or not Mr. Tripp owned a gun in June of 2018?
Objection asked and answered.
No. In the specific way that you're asking there.
Well, what is it about the way I'm asking?
Because if you have a gun license, it often implies that you would own a gun, in my mind.
Okay, so someone told you he had a gun license.
Yes.
And you want to get that point across to me that you understood he had a gun license.
Yeah.
Did you have any, and what is a gun license?
A license to carry a firearm.
Oh, so are you talking about a concealed carry permit?
No more than that. That's as far as I understand gun licenses.
Okay, so you believed he had a concealed carry permit. I'm just trying to understand what you say. When you say gun license, what do you mean?
Objection. I move to strike the beginning of that. It's compound and asked and answered.
To me, a gun license is a license that you get to be able to carry a gun.
Do you think in the state of Nevada you need a license to have a gun?
Objection. Lacks foundation. Calls for speculation.
Well, I'm trying to understand why this was important to you. Do you believe in the state of Nevada you have to have a license to own a gun?
Lacks foundation. Calls for speculation.
I do.
Okay, all right. Now, going back to my original question was, did you have any knowledge as to whether or not he owned a gun?
Objection asked and
No.
answered.
What's your answer? I'm sorry.
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
So for the record, I'd ask that this transcript be marked confidential, and then we do a normal stip for the record that I don't know that we need on video, but I'm happy to have it on video, but I would like it on the court reporter, is that the court reporter will be relieved of any duty.
The transcript will be handled per code. I will retain my duties regarding the transcript and read and sign for the witness.
You like
Thank you.
to do it that way? That's fine by me. I will add that the witness, once the witness is provided with the final, she will have 30 days to review, sign, make any corrections. If it is not signed within that 30-day period, a copy can be used as if it's the original. Is that fine with you, Robert?
I have no objection.
I think we can all go off.
This concludes today's deposition of Sarah O'Brien. We are going off the record at approximately 9:40 p.m.